We've all heard of the Sahara. Sure you have. It's the largest hot desert on the planet. A sea of sand covering an area larger than the contiguous United States. But have you ever wondered what lies beneath the sand dunes? To answer this question, we must travel deep into the past of our blue planet. Up until some 6,000 years ago, the Sahara was grassland. Humans were around at this time, not me, spreading agriculture around the planet. In the north of Africa, the color green dominated. Plenty of rainfall meant that there were lakes, rivers, pastures, and even forests. A completely different image of the Sahara from the barren landscape of today. But then, the climate started to shift. The region became parched, and the vegetation started disappearing. The wind did the rest. It took away the fine sediment after there were no plant roots to hold the ground together. Give it a couple thousands of years, and you get a familiar image of the Sahara. Sand and rocks stretching as far as the eye can see. But when it comes to volume, only a quarter of the Sahara is actually sand. The yellow sands of the Sahara are just one part of the story. The desert has many other features, such as gravel plains, salt flats, and plateaus. Makes you think if we understand the word desert correctly. For people who study such terrains, geologists, there is only one condition for defining a desert: precipitation. If an area gets little or no rain, then it's considered a desert. The Sahara certainly fits the bill. Its average annual rainfall is just 3 inches. Compare that to the nearly 45 inches a year in New York. When we look at precipitation, this sandy desert is only the third largest in the world. Number 1 and 2 are Antarctica and the Arctic. They are larger than the Sahara by millions of square miles. It sounds odd, but there is more than one type of desert. The first two are polar deserts, while the Sahara is a subtropical desert. But the difference in air temperature are staggering. In Antarctica's interior, temperatures plummet to minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Compare that to the highest temperature on record in the Sahara of 136 degrees Fahrenheit. But this desert has a cool side. At night, the temperature is roughly the same as the average yearly temperature in Denmark. This hot and cold roller coaster makes it hard to choose the right outfit when venturing into the Sahara. And what about the sand? How deep is it actually? The depth varies between 70 and 140 feet. That's not too deep. If you put the Statue of Liberty in a tall dune, half of it would still stick out of the sand. Its vast amounts in the Sahara were created by aeolian processes. That's Greek for wind. Over time, it blows and shapes the surface of the Earth. In dry areas with sparse vegetation, winds erode the ground much faster. That's what happened in North Africa. Under all that sand is the bedrock and cracked clay. If you started digging, you would find the same everywhere on the planet, with one important difference. There is some type of soil covering the bedrock. This is not the case in the Sahara. Because of the arid climate and a lack of vegetation, sand covers the ground below. Over the course of thousands of years, a lot of interesting finds ended up in the desert sand. For example, there are petrified tree trunks. These are essentially preserved prehistoric trees. They date back to the time when the region was lush green. In some places, the trees of this fossilized forest are at least 65 feet tall. The wood is so well preserved that you can still see the texture and knots. There are even fossilized pine cones. In 1992, scientists found glass fragments in eastern Sahara. These canary yellow glass shards were scattered across hundreds of miles. They didn't belong to an ancient civilization, although ancient Egyptians used them to make jewelry. In fact, the breastplate of King Tut had a beautiful scarab beetle centerpiece made from this desert glass. For a long time, scientists were puzzled about the true origins of these fragments. They finally concluded that the glass was around 29 million years old. It is an impact tape. If that sounds like it has something to do with the word impact, you are correct. These rocks are formed when a meteorite hits the surface of the Earth. This generates a lot of heat. Scientists estimate that the temperature needed to melt this mineral was close to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Apart from the regular fine-grained sand, we also have melted sand in the Sahara. But the desert conceals other unlikely artifacts. Shark teeth are a common find in Morocco, which sits in the western part of the Sahara. What are the fossilized teeth of these marine predators doing in the middle of the desert? This part of the world looked entirely different millions of years ago. There was a sea cutting right through what is now a desert. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran the length of present-day Algeria and Mali. It was around 165 feet deep. That was enough for all sorts of aquatic animals to inhabit it. Large catfish, sea snakes, and of course sharks lived in the area. British archaeologists even unearthed a turtle shell in Mali in the 1980s. For centuries, there was even an entire city hidden under the desert. Timgad was a Roman outpost constructed by the Emperor Trajan around the year 100 in the current era. For various reasons, its residents abandoned it around the year 700. The sands of the Sahara soon engulfed the city. It had remained hidden for nearly 1,000 years. Then, in the 1700s, a Scottish explorer started digging out the city. His team first uncovered a sandstone triumphal arch 40 feet high, similar to the ones we can see in Rome and Paris today. An amphitheater soon popped out of the sand, and it was followed by well-preserved statues of Roman emperors. The Scotsman's find was so impressive that no one believed him at first. It took 2 more centuries for archaeologists to fully excavate the city during the 1950s. The site covers a surface as large as 10 polo fields. The ruins reveal the full mastery of Roman city planning. All the streets meet at a right angle in what is known as an orthogonal grid. You can find the same layout in modern cities such as New York. Historians estimate that during its heyday, 10,000 people called Timgad home. Different nationalities lived here, from Romans to people of African descent. Today, more than 2.5 million people live in and around the Sahara. They are spread across 11 countries in total, and their living space is growing. The desert is 10% larger than it was just a century ago. This process doesn't involve sand pouring out of the Sahara. The ecosystems on the edges of the desert simply change over time. The wind blows the soil away and vegetation dwindles. The perfect conditions for the formation of a desert landscape. These changes are happening in the Sahel, a region south of the Sahara Desert. That's why the African countries have recently come together for a project called the Great Green Wall. The primary goal is to stop the desertification of the Sahel and hold back the sands of the Sahara. Their plan is ambitious and involves planting a wall of trees from the west to the east of the African continent. The proposed forest is not only going to be long, but wide as well. The Sahara and the Sahel share a historic bond. Since antiquity, camel caravans have been making the journey from Africa's Mediterranean coast in the north to the savannas in the south. The golden age of this trade kicked off in the 9th century. The perilous journey took several months to complete. The route was 2.5 times longer than the length of the Grand Canyon. Explorers still find evidence of these ancient caravans hidden away under the sands of the Sahara. The desert welcomes you with challenging conditions of abandoned environments and extreme temperatures. Hey, some of us would prefer dessert, chocolate over sand and rocks. Oh well. Just like cactuses and camels, buildings have had to adapt to these conditions. Here are some examples of astonishing structures in deserts. These structures are called Earthships. They're located in a New Mexico desert town. A large community of like-minded people lives in them. What's even more interesting is that the location of these buildings is registered as dumpsters. Maybe it's because all these structures are made out of old tires, bottles, and cans. Earthships operate using green building principles. About 40% of a typical Earthship is built with natural or recycled materials. Imagine the walls made up of hundreds of used tires packed with dirt. Then there are layers of floor-to-ceiling passive solar windows. They gathered the sunlight during winter and reflected in the summer to keep the structures at a reasonable room temperature. You can see plants in corridors and glass bottles or aluminum cans stuffed inside walls. Certainly a distinct house in many ways. Mike Reynolds is an architect who noticed the alarming waste and consumption levels in the 1970s. He designed a fully sustainable home out of cans back then. Almost 40 years later, he becomes the one who brings together all the other Earthshippers. Reynolds drove a Mercedes, but it ran off of the vegetable oil he picked up at fast food restaurants in town. A standard 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom Earthship costs about $250,000 in this town. Yet there are Earthships like Dobson House that can cost as much as $1.5 million. If you do it yourself, with family and friends, you can eliminate the cost of labor, and it becomes relatively less expensive. Let's assume you're really going to build one. Where can it be? Well, anywhere. Earthships currently fit in the cold, dry air of Canada, as well as the hot and humid climate of Haiti. This is the Mirage Mirror House. It's an installation set in the Southern California desert. Mirage opened in 2017 as part of a contemporary art exhibition. It's composed of mirrors. This minimalistic structure blends with the environment around it. The doors, windows, and openings have been removed to create an amazing experience. What you have in the landscape is reflected back to you. How's it made? With mirrored surfaces. At night, the distant lights refract from the mirrors. In the daytime, the sky is transformed into banks of clouds. There's no fixed scenery in this house. How about seeing a futuristic structure in the deep desert? Architects designed a concept home that pairs perfectly with Elon Musk's Cybertruck. The house has a post-apocalyptic theme. When I say post-apocalyptic, it's because I can't say it. Anyway, the house is designed to survive in a disaster scenario. The Cyber House has steel gates, the windows are armored, and the exterior walls are made out of super strong material. Modern house is controlled by an autonomous geothermal heat pump. To put it in less sci-fi terms, you can keep the internal temperature steady. This sleek house has an entrance that can fit the Cybertruck. After all, it's inspired by it in the first place. Plus, the Cybertruck can be lifted to the second floor to be more secure. This is King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Saudi Arabia. Basically, it's a laboratory in a desert. It was designed to demand minimum energy. The architecture has patterns on the walls and ceilings, giving reference to the local tradition of geometric form. The next stop is Swartberg House in South Africa. This one is located near the Swartberg Mountains, but don't get too excited. It's on the edge of the Great Karoo Desert. It's a 4-bedroom apartment. It has a special temperature regulating system. The system works like a shield from the heat in the summer and as a sun trap in the winter. You're looking at the Grand Mosque of Djenné in Mali. This mosque is 52 feet tall. This is impressive because it's made of only sticks and a special mix of mud and other natural elements found in the desert. Petra is an ancient city hidden in the Jordan Desert. The structures are carved directly into red, white, and pink-colored sandstone cliff faces. It's located among the canyons and mountains near the desert. The place was a trade center many years ago. You might already see pictures of the impressive facade of the treasury. This structure still holds many mysteries in it. For starters, scientists can't explain how the Nabateans managed to create such a structure thousands of years ago. Did you know that there's another mysterious place in the middle of the desert that has a similar structure to Petra? Median Saleh was like a second capital of the Nabatean kingdom. Yet another secret they left for us to decipher. It has over 100 decorated tombs and more than 1,000 non-monumental graves. Plus, inscriptions and cave drawings are also here, again surrounded by sandstone. This wooden shack was a post office once. The structure is in the Tengger Desert of Mongolia. It's surrounded by nothing. Sand is the only thing that accompanies the lonely structure. The building is only 23 square inches. As you can guess, it didn't get too many visitors. It was abandoned for over 35 years. Its fate changed one day when a woman discovered the building. Mrs. Yang and her friend came up with an idea. They were going to reach businesses and people who wanted to send letters and postcards from the world's loneliest post office without actually visiting the place. It worked. The post office rarely gets visitors in place, but it's busy online. Over 20,000 letters and postcards were sent from the desert post office in December 2021 alone. The place is about 6 miles off the nearest road. A post truck picks the letters up and hits the road for delivery. Eventually, they are shipped all over the world. A second destination in Saudi Arabia is King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture. The building has an interesting design. It took nearly a decade to build this complex structure. It's a 321-foot-tall tower which stands out with its look. Stone Matters Pavilion is a stone structure in Palestine. The structure spans a surface area of 93 square inches. It has been built entirely out of 300 interlocking stones that mutually support each other. The concave roofs, and yes, they look like giant bowls, are designed that way to collect rainwater. The structure is in Iran. Interestingly, in Iran, the evaporation rate is 3 times faster than the world average, so this bowl-like design comes in very handy. It captures the water in a way that the water can form a single mass as a whole before it evaporates. The outer shell of the roof system collects rainwater, but it also works as an additional shading. It makes air move freely, designed like a cooling mechanism for both roofs. Eco Lodge in Egypt is the next stop. The project is built in a place that overlooks the desert and is constructed using locally available materials like sun-fired bricks and palm wood. The building is an example of traditional architecture. There's a water basin that lets in the air to keep the interior cool. A worthy mention is the CID Interpretation Center in Chile. Chile's Atacama Desert is among the top tourist destinations in the country. To help the tourists, architects designed a visitors center as part of the infrastructure for the wind farm. Here, the cold winter months don't freeze people because the large windows make the most of solar heating. What's even more interesting is that the building is designed to go completely dark at night. Imagine you somehow bumped into the building by accident. Black Desert House is a building respecting the stars. At night, this house goes completely dark. It dissolves into the night, so the stars can appear more prominent. Now, any mysterious desert buildings you know that aren't on this list? Let us know in the comments. So, the Sahara Desert is so big that it covers 8% of the world's territory. It's bigger than the USA or China. Surprisingly, the Sahara is not the largest desert in the world. It is the third largest, behind Antarctica and the Arctic. But it is definitely the hottest one. Temperatures there reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit. This place has some of the most incredible sand dunes you've ever seen, towering up to 1,476 feet. But here's the kicker. There's a real risk that these dunes might continue to spread until they cover the entire world. Surprisingly, the influence of the Sahara Desert extends far beyond its borders. Its dust, carried by powerful winds, makes its way to the UK and across the European continent, particularly in winter. This dust settling on the ground where it rains is a familiar sight to those in the UK, often leaving a red residue on cars. This connection between the Sahara, England, and Europe serves as a stark reminder of the global reach of environmental phenomena. You might think this is not a big deal, but it could turn Europe into a desert, leaving its soil infertile and Europeans with no food. Soil is a fundamental aspect of human existence, just as crucial as clean water and air. Without it, we're left with nothing but a bleak and barren landscape. The Sahara Desert has already made its jump across the Mediterranean Sea, which is concerning and could change the landscape forever. 1/5 of Spain has already turned into a desert. The next victim is Italy, which also faces the problem of desertification. In fact, almost all European countries have the same issue. According to an expert, the land that has not changed for nearly 2,000 years will become mostly rock, and people living on this land will be gone. 60% of the soil in Moldova is gone, and the problem has expanded beyond the Black Sea. It has reached China and Mongolia, thousands of miles away from the Sahara Desert. All of this causes losses of $4 billion a year. The threat is so significant that even the UN has gathered the necessary resources to solve the problem as soon as possible. Italy is sending help to Africa to stop the Sahara Desert from expanding. If this process does not stop in the next 10 years, millions will be forced to leave their homes. The Sahara Desert is growing for approximately 30 miles per decade. You do the math and see how long it will take to cover Europe. Since 1920, the Sahara has expanded by around 10%. But not all hope is lost because more than 172 countries have joined to put a stop to the desertification of the world. The World Food Program is a project that aims to help bring back green land that was once present in the Sahara. When they told people who called the Sahara home what they were about to do, the latter basically laughed in their faces and said it was impossible. But when you have a specific goal in mind, the impossible becomes possible. If we traveled back around 5,000 years into the past, we would see a beautiful forest with lush green trees and grass. Africa's climate has been changing for 21,000 years, from fantastic greenery to uninhabitable deserts. This has to do with Earth's rotation and the monsoons that bring water to this dry continent. But with the help of scientists and some clever tricks, we can bring the greenery back and stop the Sahara in its tracks. The Senegal River serves as a border between the Sahara Desert, Senegal City, and Mauritania. When you look at this area from space, you'll see how the desert is expanding to Senegal because the vegetation along the riverbank is almost non-existent. Forests can serve as a barrier, stopping the sand from getting blown away and the desert from expanding. An effort to create a great green wall is being made, and how they do it is actually quite impressive. Nothing has been growing in the currently restored area for more than 40 years, making locals find other places to call home. People were thrilled when they saw that the land could be restored. They're very committed and learn to work with the soil and grow food. At the same moment, more than 30,000 hectares have been restored and transformed into lush greenery. The Sahel region is the starting point of desertification, and it is crucial to establish a green wall in that area first. To make this wall is not rocket science, since it only takes a few simple steps. The ground there is baked by the sun and as hard as a block of concrete. If you've ever poured water on concrete, you know that it just flows away. It doesn't stay in one place. So they had to create water-retaining half-moons that would hold the water and make it available to plants. When you learn about how these half-moons work, you might say, how did they not think of that sooner? Actually, this technique is ancient, and it was once implemented in Sahel, but it was lost over time. When the rain falls, the water is collected into the half-moons that are positioned a bit lower than the ground below contour lines. There is also a kind of bank at the end of the shape that prevents water from overflowing. And in the middle, there are plants that are happy because they have plenty of water to thrive. Also, it's essential to grow native plants that are kind of used to harsh conditions, like sorghum and millet. These plants have been surviving there for thousands of years and produce a good amount of biomass, which means the land can be rehabilitated faster and people will have food sooner. The water that will enter the half-moons won't be lost. It will penetrate the ground and top off underground waters. This will ensure the ground that H2O will never run out and that future generations will have usable aqua. This brilliant planting technique is not limited to half-moons. People also create lines and plant various vegetables, such as tomatoes. Next, there are places only for trees, like lemons or oranges. After a long hot day, nothing is better than a freshly made cold lemonade. The trees will also protect the soil, and with some luck, there will be a new forest in the Sahara Desert. The goal is to copy the forest dynamic. Start with small plants and gradually expand to bigger plants that are more useful than the tiny ones. They are aiming to plant more than 10,000 trees. Right now, many people are leaving the Sahara after the rainy season, going to cities or leaving Africa altogether. At this time of year, villages are like ghost towns. Only animals can be found there. Most people are gone. I mean, who would blame them? Nobody wants to live in the sand where nothing grows. Luckily, with all this new, old technology being developed, Many people are slowly but surely returning to their land and starting to work in agriculture. The best thing is that there are no brutal winters, so plants grow 12 months a year, and people can always have food. People are becoming more social because now everybody stays in their villages and doesn't travel much. If this project works out, Africa will be saved, and the world won't turn into a giant desert. You find yourself in Africa, land of unique wildlife, home to a great variety of cultures and languages, and, first and foremost, host to the world's largest hot desert, the Sahara. It's daytime, and you are thirsty for some water and shade. You've been walking for days, trying to find one of those precious-looking oases. You feel you're near, but the horizon just keeps stretching and stretching. Your mind is tired, and your body is feeling all the heat. It's like you've eaten a full plate of hot pepper and then some more, judging by how much you're sweating. And when I say hot, think 100 degrees Fahrenheit hot, on average. No wonder this is happening. After all, you find yourself in the world's biggest hot desert. Now I say hot desert since the biggest deserted landscapes are actually the cold ones, located in Antarctica and the Arctic. I see Antarctica's frozen desert is more or less the size of 1 million LAXs. Yep, the Los Angeles International Airport. The Arctic Desert is just a bit smaller than that. Now, in case you don't know, the Sahara Desert is located in northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean all the way over to the Red Sea. It occupies an area large enough to place approximately 100,000 Disney World theme parks side by side. According to scientists, its boundaries are expanding. Deserts usually form in the subtropics because of what's called Hadley circulation. The air rises at the equator and descends into the subtropics. This circulation of air has a drying effect, which helps the formation of desert landscapes. Since the 1920s, the Sahara is considered to have expanded by over 10%. How is this happening? Well, let's start from the beginning. You probably know the Sahara Desert as one of the most inhospitable places on Earth today. Just FYI, for a place to be considered a desert, it has to receive less than 4 inches of rain per year. Due to the very small precipitation index, deserts are usually dry and arid places. There is little humidity in the air, and daytime temperatures can go as high as 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Usually, there isn't that much animal and plant life because of the lack of water. But in the Sahara's case, it wasn't always like that. It may be difficult to imagine northern Africa without the tons of sand it has today. But about 20,000 years ago, the Sahara was actually one big oasis. Recent discoveries show clear evidence of what the scientists now call the Green Sahara. In the mid-1800s, a German explorer crossing the Sahara encountered some paintings and engravings that nomad artists had left behind. What he saw in those paintings looked nothing like his actual surroundings. Instead of an arid landscape with only camels and desert vegetation, the rock paintings depicted jungle animals like giraffes and hippos. There were even images of livestock and grazing animals such as cattle and sheep, something that seems impossible for modern-day Sahara. Artists usually draw what they see around them, so this finding really intrigued the German explorer. The drawings were so detailed that the artists must have had close contact with those animals. You can find this rock art spread out in the northern part of the African continent, from western Sahara to Saudi Arabia. Geologists soon took a keen interest in this and found the first clues to what this could mean. They have been able to confirm that, in fact, northern Africa was once much wetter. They found evidence from nearby deep-sea sediment off the coast of Mauritania. Sampled cores of underwater sand and mud, known as Saharan dust flux, show geologists that, indeed, a green Sahara was possible. The more dust is blowing off of the desert and into the bottom of the ocean, the drier the climate in the region. The sediment cores show that there was much less dust, only half as much, coming off northern Africa during the humid period. This period has to do with Earth's natural cycles. Normally, the Earth rotates at a tilt of 23.5 degrees, but this angle is not consistent and changes over time. Earth's tilt is responsible for the amount of sunlight each hemisphere receives. It affects several ecosystem functions on the planet. During the time of the Green Sahara, The Earth received between 4 and 8% more sunlight than it does today. So when the Earth tilted about 20,000 years ago, the northern hemisphere received more direct sunlight, which affected humidity levels in the region. As the northern hemisphere got warmer, this affected monsoon activity, more specifically the West African monsoon. Monsoons are wind systems that affect a region's rainfall index and humidity levels. As a part of the globe gets warmer, it allows for more air to rise. It combines with the wind to draw moisture up into the atmosphere. Little by little, northern Africa also became wetter. The increased moisture made the Sahara so wet that there were actual bodies of water in the region. As vegetation grew, the plants held onto moisture better than bare sand could. There is evidence of natural basins throughout the Sahara and lakes so big they would fit all of the U.S.'s Great Lakes inside of them. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of vibrant societies in what are now arid areas. It looks like ancient cultures were able to take full advantage of the African humid period. According to researchers, the human population peaked across the Sahara about 9,000 years ago. There are traces of fireplaces, hunting tools, fishhooks, and even mounds of fish bones. Records show that there have been over 230 green periods over the span of 8 million years. Solar radiation is always changing due to natural orbital cycles. That's why Earth will most certainly see another green Sahara moment. It might be thousands of years from now, but it will happen. The same way the Sahara turns green, it turns yellow again. Let's put it like that. All it takes is a significant axial tilt and a few years of readjusting. However, another phenomenon is calling the attention of scientists now. Recent studies by the National Science Foundation from the University of Maryland show the Sahara has expanded 10% over the past 90 years. This phenomenon is called desertification, which literally means fertile land turning into desert land. The Sahara Desert is now advancing into the semi-arid region of Sahel. In 1950, this region was home to 31 million people. Today, its population is over 100 million people. This rapid population growth has largely contributed to the Sahara's expansion. Farmers that were once nomads began settling down. Land usage grew more intense, aiding in weakening the soil. The demand for food has caused an overcropping of the land, so even more of it is turning into the desert now. The study also shows that natural climate cycles can affect rainfall in the Sahara and the Sahel. Scientists affirm that all deserts fluctuate, not only the Sahara. A desert's boundary may expand in the dry winter and contract during the wetter summer. South of the Sahara lies the Chad Basin. It is a natural body of water that now serves as an indicator of the Sahara's expansion. The Chad Basin is located in the region where the Sahara is advancing southward. An atmospheric and ocean expert from the University of Maryland explains that rainfall has reduced greatly in the entire region. Due to reduced rainfalls, there is less water across the entire basin, and even Chad Lake is drying out. Just like the Sahara, the Atacama Desert in Chile, deemed the world's driest, is also expanding. It is located north of the city of Santiago, and its southern border is expanding toward the Chilean capital. Because the climate is getting drier and drier here, the city of Santiago risks turning into an arid or semi-arid region itself. The once fertile valleys of local rivers that lived on agriculture and livestock for many generations are losing their revenues as Chilean land is turning into a desert. Since 2010, Santiago has received only a third of its annual rainfall. Outside of the city, farmers are digging holes in search of blue gold, or simply put, water. The situation here is very similar to that of Sahel. So tell me this. Were you as surprised as I was to find out what has been happening in the Sahara region? Feel free to share in the comments below.
Endless hot deserts seem lifeless at first glance. But among these sands, you can meet dangerous and sometimes creepy creatures. Some of them can only cause health problems, but some can stay in your memory forever. Let's get to know them, starting with dangerous ones and finishing with real nightmares. So, you're walking through a desert and see a big teddy bear with open hands. You understand that it's probably a mirage, but still, you come closer. You were right. It's not a plush toy, but a giant cactus. There's something strange about it. Thanks to some strange fluff, the branches resemble the arms of a teddy bear. However, this is not fluff, but thousands of thin needles, and they are the reason you shouldn't come closer. The cactus is called the jumping cholla, or teddy bear cholla. It grows in the desert areas of Arizona and in the northern part of Mexico. Don't worry, this cactus won't attack you, but it will cling to your skin or clothes if you touch it. Such a fur coat protects the cactus from animals, creates shade, and saves it from heat. The lateral branches are the most important parts of the plant as they carry out photosynthesis and accumulate a large amount of moisture inside. So, despite all the danger, the cactus can be helpful for desert wanderers. And the danger here is needles. If you look closer at them, you will see they have the shape of hooks. One touch, and hundreds of thorns are already in your finger. It's pretty difficult to get rid of them, and the needles cause unpleasant, painful sensations. But the coolest thing about this cactus is the way it reproduces. The plant clones itself in a new place. When animals and people pass the jumping cholla and touch it, the cactus gives them a small piece of itself, along with the needles. As soon as you throw this piece to the ground, it takes root and starts growing. The degree of danger is rising. The next monster from the desert is running toward us, and that is an ostrich. Many think these animals are cowards hiding their heads in the sand. You will most likely change your mind if you're unlucky enough to meet one. Usually, ostriches are not aggressive, but you should run if you come closer to their nest. On the other hand, you won't be able to do that because ostriches move at a speed of 43 miles per hour. You need a car to get away from them. They run and hit their enemy with their chests. There have been cases when ostriches attacked vans and caused significant damage to them. But the main danger these birds present is their powerful legs with sharp claws. They can deliver strong blows with them and even beat a prone opponent. So yes, if you see an ostrich in the distance, go the other way. This small spotted lizard lives underground almost all the time in the arid deserts of the southwestern US and northwestern Mexico. Sometimes it goes outside to find lunch. It only seems cute, but in fact, it's a dangerous Gila monster. Its thick skin protects the reptile from hawks, coyotes, and other predators. But its main protection is its venom. Snakes and spiders inject their toxins using long, needle-like fangs. The Gila monster clamps down and chews the prey to spread the venom. And when it bites a person, it can keep its jaws closed for a long time. Getting rid of the animal is a tricky feat. People who have experienced the effects of the venom say it feels as if hot magma passes through the veins. Despite this, the lizard turned out to be useful for science. Doctors used its venom to create medicines for diabetes and obesity. The time has come. Now you're about to meet one of the creepiest creatures living in the desert. Be quiet and listen to the silence. Stand still. There's no one around. Suddenly, you hear some hissing coming from below. You lower your head and see it. A big yellow spider the size of a human palm with strong jaws and long legs hides in the shadow of your body. In horror, you run away from this monster, but it goes after you. It isn't easy to do it in this situation, but try to calm down. The creature isn't interested in you. It wants only your shadow to hide from the scorching sun. Anyway, it's better not to touch it. The powerful jaws of the camel spider can cause unpleasant sensations, to put it mildly. And, by the way, this creature isn't really a spider. Yeah, it belongs to the class of arachnids, but it's a separate species, Sulpicid. It likes to bite. It's fearless and pretty aggressive. The spider preys on insects, lizards, rodents, and small birds. It can also move at a speed of 10 miles per hour. For their small size, this is very fast. You need to be a professional athlete to run away from it. Most often, you can find camel spiders in the deserts of the Middle East, but they also live in Mexico and the southwestern US. These runners are nocturnal and try to avoid the sun during the day, so they are always hunting your shadow. By the way, they got their name because they often hide in the shadows of camels. You won't hide from them during the day, but they will also want to come after you at night, especially if you make a fire. Solpugids always run to the light in the hope of eating something. Some species of these spiders make a hissing sound to scare their enemies away. Now, let's calm down for a second and leave the hot desert. We're going into the humid tropics of Tanzania. Under tree bark, fallen leaves, and in dark caves, you can meet one of the most terrifying creatures on Earth, a tailless whip scorpion. Imagine a big scorpion without a tail, with a flat body that looks like it has been pressed by something. It's similar to spiders, but has no venom glands and can't spin a web. This monster is silent and fast, but the scariest thing is its 2 front claws, twice as long as the creature itself. Any prey it catches will never escape. Life in a dark cave has spoiled its eyesight, so the whip scorpion tries to avoid sunlight. During molting, it climbs up to the ceiling and slowly comes out of its old skin. Imagine directing your flashlight there and seeing small cocoons out of which pale spiders with excessively long legs crawl. If you really meet it, be calm and slowly go away as far as possible. Be careful. The flat scorpion can crawl under your clothes in a second and bite you in the stomach. And that's not the worst part. Okay, this is a joke. This pretty guy is one of the shyest and most harmless creatures among spiders and scorpions. It's afraid of you and will never attack. Many consider it beautiful and keep whip scorpions in glass terrariums. If you want such a pet, carefully watch it so that it doesn't run away from its house. If it happens, it will be pretty challenging to catch it again. In a matter of moments, it can get under your bed or go through gaps in the floor. Then it'll go to your neighbor's apartment through a ventilation system and scare people there. Okay, how about one more scorpion? It's not as creepy as the other creatures in this video, but it's the most venomous scorpion in the USA. This is the Arizona bark scorpion. The problem is that you can see it in the desert, in your home, or in the yard. These dangerous venomous beasts crawl into rooms and often sting people. One time is enough to cause pain, similar to a bee sting, but someone with an allergy may experience paralysis, breathing problems, and other health issues.
Under the burning sun, among the sand dunes, somewhere in the Sahara Desert, you're walking in search of an ancient treasure. Finally, you find a strange rock in the sand. It's big, looks like a large piece of black coal or rock, but something shiny on its surface makes the rock unusual. This unique find is the oldest thing that has ever been discovered on our planet. This rock was born long before Earth appeared in outer space. The unusual meteorite was found in 2020 in a remote area of the Sahara Desert. Scientists have analyzed the isotopes of magnesium and aluminum on the stone's surface and found that its age is about 4.5 billion years. At the moment, this is the oldest sample of magma from space in history. It belongs to a small protoplanet that didn't have time to form completely. It happened a very long time ago when our solar system was forming. Many huge asteroids were floating in space. Some of them were formed into huge celestial bodies, which later became planets. The big rocky planets were absorbing the smaller ones. The rock was part of a little protoplanet that just began its formation, but another huge asteroid destroyed it. The planet shattered into billions of pieces. Some of them became part of other planets. Some flew outside the solar system, and one piece that had been wandering in space until our Earth was formed. After that, it hit the planet's atmosphere and fell into the territory now known as the Sahara Desert. The rock was discovered in 2020, but the erosion of extraterrestrial rocks shows that it could have fallen much earlier. This ancient thing weighing around 70 pounds has several pieces of different meteorites inside. In simple words, it's a volcanic rock consisting of lava. It has cooled, solidified, and crystallized. That's why you notice the glitter. Scientists hope that further study of the rock will help to learn more about our solar system foundation. The biggest asteroid discovered in the U.S. is the Willamette. Its size is 84 square feet, and its weight is more than 15 tons. This is half the weight of a bus. Several people can fit on the surface of this outer space object. But the coolest thing is that it's not a rock like most meteorites that were found. Willamette is made of nickel and iron. This massive piece of metal was discovered in 1906. Now, the huge rock is kept at the American Museum of Natural History. The largest meteorite ever found is Hoba. It's located in Namibia, and people have never changed its position because it's too heavy. The weight of Hoba is 60 tons. It's heavier than a tank. The next space-related event occurred on February 28 in southwest England. On this day, a huge flash lit up the sky. Then there was a loud crash. Several residents opened the doors of their houses and noticed a black sooty spot on the lawn. They immediately guessed what had happened and reported the discovery to the British Meteorite Observation Network. If you ever find a meteorite, report it to some geological research or space center as soon as possible. The longer a space rock lies on the ground, the faster it loses its value. Rain, dust, snow, wind, scorching sun, all these factors damage the surface of the meteorite. It makes it difficult to study the celestial object. The meteorite found in England looks like coal, but it's way softer and more fragile. It most likely used to contain frozen water. The rock is part of a huge asteroid that plowed through outer space when our solar system hadn't fully formed yet. They found a unique combination of minerals inside the rock. It can help scientists learn more about the origins of the solar system and life on Earth. Now we're heading to Germany, to the small town of Nördlingen. A huge ancient meteorite's hidden here. It's very difficult to notice it unless you know the secret of this town. You're walking along the cozy little streets and looking at the buildings with beautiful architecture. You spend the whole day there and don't find anything that reminds you of a meteorite. To solve the mystery, you need to get out of town. So you climb a high hill and see that the city is located inside a pit. For a long time, locals were sure the house was located in the crater of an extinct volcano. If you look at the houses from a certain angle, you may notice an unusual shining coming from them. In the middle of the 20th century, a group of geologists came here and immediately declared that the crater doesn't look like a volcanic one. The town was built on a huge crater left by a meteorite. The huge celestial body fell here about 15 million years ago. It was so hot that the carbon bubbles inside instantly turned into small diamonds. When people were building this city, they didn't know they were using expensive stones, since the diamonds were hardly visible. The locals never attached importance to the fact that the city walls shine unusually in the sun. Now they believe this place was built from diamonds that had fallen from the sky. Our next stop is in the UK again. This time the rocks are of an earthly origin. The famous Stonehenge. People place circles of rocks here in a certain order. Everyone knows about this archaeological monument, but no one knows the reason for its creation for certain. Another construction built out of mysterious rocks was discovered just 2 miles away. It's called Superhenge. It's bigger, heavier, and takes up more space. Each plate here is 15 feet, which is about the height of 2 floors. Once, the stone stood vertically and formed a huge semicircle. But someone pushed the stones over about 4,500 years ago. It was a college prank. No, not really. That's why they couldn't be detected for a long time. Scientists still can't solve the mystery of Superhenge, but they believe the standing vertical stones were part of some huge monument. Some other amazing rocks are located in the south of Costa Rica. There are big ones, the size of a human, and there are smaller ones, the size of bowling balls. And they all have a perfectly round shape. These giant rocky spheres were created by people. It must have taken years of polishing using stone tools to get the perfect round shape. These balls are incredibly heavy, but can easily roll like a basketball. All the rocks are of a different age. Some of them were created about 2,500 years ago. Most of them are made of molten volcanic magma. Until now, scientists don't know for what purpose these stones were used. They were found in different parts of Costa Rica, near big cities. It's possible that ancient civilizations installed them specifically to show the greatness of local kings. Also, many experts believe the rocks were used as a tool for studying astronomy. The people who knew their purpose of the rocks had disappeared, and the history of the stones was lost along with them. Let's finish our journey with the coolest archaeological find. You're walking through the desert of Peru and climbing a low hill. You look down and notice the surface of the hill is covered with strange lines. You walk far away and see a huge cat on the hill. Such a drawing is called a geoglyph. Its length is around 120 feet, which is about half the size of a Boeing commercial jet. Archaeologists discovered the giant cat in 2020 and found out that it had been created somewhere between 200 and 100 BCE. This huge drawing is part of a mysterious group of different pictures. In addition to the cat, there are other animals, plants, and fantastic figures. All of them were found in the desert of Peru. The kitten was found by chance. Archaeologists didn't see it at first because natural erosion on the hillside had almost erased the silhouette. You plan to spend your summer vacation in Africa. The final destination is the Sahara Desert. It's located in northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. You're excited to ride camels and learn about the region's rich cultures. You hop on an extensively long flight, and finally, you are here. You find yourself in the world's biggest hot desert. Can you believe it's 3 million square miles? You're ready for your first adventure after drinking liters of ice-cold water. The guide gives you a choice. You can spend 2 weeks visiting a collection of oases, or you can help them solve an ongoing local mystery. Deep into the desert, near this Algerian town, lies a mystery begging to be solved. A collection of huge, spotted circles in the sand. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles in a straight line. The circles were first identified via Google Earth images several years ago. People have debated them for years, but no one seems to know the answer. The strange thing is that they are so many miles away from any towns, roads, or human activity. The quickest way to discover the truth behind the circles is asking questions. You grab your notebook and set out to talk to locals. Everyone is helpful in this scenario: geographers, anthropologists, elders, and historians. The first person you talk to is a map expert. You need to understand if those circles were authentic or a satellite glitch. You end up interviewing the people who take Google Earth satellite pictures. The circles are really there. They appear in multiple pictures from many years. Then, let's understand why they are there in the first place. After 2 days of interviews, you have your first lead. The circles could be the result of oil activity. Experts explained why this would make sense. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this would be a sensible guess. Usually, to find out if there is anything worth extracting, companies would undertake seismic surveys. Seismic surveys are a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know what is located there. A special vehicle could have marked the soil that way. So, did we unravel the mystery? Not quite so. As you know, the Sahara Desert is one of the driest areas on the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So, these circles could be a kind of ruin or leftovers from ancient water wells. Again, I'd say this is a sensible guess. Ready for some fact-checking? Some anthropologists agree that these circles could be ancient foggaras. Foggara is the name of a 2,500-year-old style of irrigation system, usually found in northern Africa. It is also known as a qanat in other places in northern Africa. Locals would dig a deep well at an elevated point, deep enough to tap into underground water. They would then dig parallel shafts at regular distances. Then they would dig an underground channel that connected the city to the well. Solely with the help of gravity, water would run from the well to the city. This traditional technology provided water for crops, livestock, and humans. Now, let's say these wells made human-made oases possible. Even the closest municipality name was an indication that this could be true. The name Foggara Esaoia is actually named after foggaras, these ancient wells. Now this lead was proving to be very accurate. You decide to travel over there to see for yourself. You take a local bus, sit back and enjoy the ride. The landscape in northern Algeria is filled with ancient-looking towns. You even see ruins of wells along the way, on the outskirts of smaller cities. Opening Google satellite images, you can see the Qanat's markings on the ground, a series of holes running down several miles. But as soon as you arrive, you find out you were wrong. Dale Lightfoot, one of the world's leading experts on Qanats, said that the circles were definitely not Qanats. Even the satellite images confirm this difference. Uh-oh, we were so close! Apparently, Qanats or foggaras would not run down a straight line. They wouldn't be shaped like circles. Another clue that this wasn't the case was that there were no towns at the end. The circles were really far away from any human activity, and Qanats were explicitly built to provide water for human settlements. Well, it sure was a good try. You almost gave up on this mystery when you decided to take one more field trip. It was days of preparation, pick up cars, food, equipment, all so that the mystery of the Sahara circles could be unraveled. On the first day, you drove over 99 miles into the desert. You were always curious to see what this part of the world looked like. Over there, you see nothing but mustard yellow dunes. The night sky is pretty decent though. You can see the entire Milky Way with your own eyes. You set up camp and sleep under a canopy of stars. The next day, tension grows. There's no cell reception. Oh dear. But thankfully, you added the coordinates of the circles to your Google map. And surprise, the offline mode works out there. You follow the coordinates, but it leads you astray. You start to get nervous, thinking this was all in vain. But you and the team get into the car and drive a few more miles past the coordinates on your phone. After a very bumpy ride, you can't believe your eyes. There it is, an enormous crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. From up high, it looks like a clock, without the pointers, of course. On the ground, they're very faint, so faint you almost miss them. Searching the area, you notice all the holes had something similar: metal wires, thin wires that you can pull from the ground. They're buried deep, so you start digging. An object starts to reveal itself. Uh-oh, it looks like old dynamite. This certainly surprises you. Better stop digging to avoid any accidents. At the end of the survey, you feel satisfied, but still curious. What could all this dynamite mean? And who put it there? What comes next is the turning point of your adventure. Walking back to the car, you see something shining on the ground. You approach the item with curiosity. It's round and rusty and looks like a sardine can? What's that doing here? Could this give you more clues about the circle's mystery? Just in case, you pick it up and put it in the car. Back in the city, the puzzle pieces start to reveal the story behind the Sahara circles. You bring photos and the sardine can and show them to local experts. They analyze your material and give you an intriguing verdict. As it turns out, guess number 1 was the closest one to the truth. So, what happened to the first guess? Why do we need to keep digging deeper? Well, because it was only half right. The Sahara circles are not a historical footprint of seismic surveying. Back when the circles were made, this technology didn't even exist. But they sure are related to oil exploration. The dynamite-filled holes were an old method for oil searching. The circles are the leftovers of surveyors looking for resources underground. And the sardine cans? Well, they were left by the workers who held explosion works. You gotta eat, right? According to the model of the can, this happened more or less around the 1950s and 1960s. So these circles aren't even that ancient. More like modern ones, if you ask me. Well. Hope you are glad you tagged along and helped unravel this mystery. See you in the next mystery-solving adventure. Australia used to have its own giants. Those were huge animals that could have dwarfed anything living on this continent these days. Scientists found the remains of many of those ancient creatures in the Narracuta Caves in South Australia, 4 hours away from Adelaide. It's a lovely region, but it can be treacherous. Watch out for holes the ground is pocked with. Known as pitfall traps, many of them are no wider than a coffee table. They're deep and plunge into the darkest of caverns. One of such caverns is called Victoria Fossil Cave, and it's a treasury that's been hiding the bones of around 45,000 animals for centuries. Some of the oldest bones belong to creatures far more terrifying than any animal you can encounter today. Those were the ancient Australian Mega-fauna, huge beasts that roamed the continent during the Pleistocene epoch. During those, there were giant snakes, huge flightless birds, wombat-like creatures the size of a rhinoceros, and many others. One of the largest examples of the Australian megafauna scientists have discovered so far is the Diprotodon. That giant herbivorous creature was 10 feet long and 6.5 feet tall, and weighed more than 6,000 pounds, about as much as a small Asian elephant. Even though this terrifying beast didn't eat meat, it could have smashed other animals with its sheer weight. Scientists have found the remains of hundreds of such creatures all over Australia, so it's safe to say that no other animal from that time or in that location was larger than this giant. Despite its creepy appearance, the Diprotodon was a relative to the modern-day wombat, and those are known to sometimes pounce humans. The Diprotodon had toes that pointed inward and were well suited for digging burrows. On the other hand, Diprotodon was a giant, and it was unlikely that it used to do so. It was likely a trait it had inherited from its smaller burrowing ancestors, or it could have used its claws to search for roots. This theory is supported by the fact that the animal's pouch was facing backward. It prevented any dirt from collecting inside while the creature was digging. Since this animal was so big, it didn't have to worry much about predators. Up until 60,000 years ago, when the first humans appeared on the continent, full-grown Diprotodons only had to look out for creatures like the quincana. Measuring in at a whopping 20 feet long, the quincana was a land crocodile. It lived in Australia from around 20 million to 40,000 years ago. It disappeared along with most other mega creatures of the last ice age. It's thought to be the result of the first humans coming to the continent. Even though the quincana was extremely fast and dangerous, it was possible that this creature got outcompeted by human hunters who took all available prey. Unlike modern crocodiles that are mainly aquatic, that mighty beast was a land dweller. Scientists figured it out by studying the quincana's legs. They were able to support and carry the body clear off the ground. It means there was no escape for ancient people once the quincana spotted them. Modern crocodiles can only push themselves along on their bellies. Such an adaptation allowed the quincana to chase its prey for long periods of time, exhausting it in the process. Another creepy feature of this ancient monster was its teeth. Aquatic crocs have conical teeth. Those are great for gripping and holding on to prey underwater. But quincana had knife-like teeth, ideal for slicing soft-bodied animals like, mammals. Another Australian monster, Thylacoleo, wasn't all that large, but it didn't make it any less terrifying. It was still among the top predators and the biggest carnivorous animals in Australia. This creature was a true oddity of nature, even by prehistoric standards. First, its teeth resembled not those of a regular predator, but those of a rodent. Its front incisors were enlarged, taking the place of canines. Premolars were also shaped like blades. They were used for cutting flesh and bone. At first, scientists thought that Thylacoleo used those teeth to eat nuts and fruits. But later, a study showed that the use of such teeth was better suited on necks and spines. The jaws of this ancient creature were immensely powerful. A 220-pound Thylacoleo had a bite force similar to that of a present-day 550-pound lion. It means that the animal could easily bring down prey much larger than itself. Then there was Thylacoleo's tail. It had strong muscles which provided the animal with the ability to use the tail as support when tackling large prey. The Thylacoleo had retractable claws, and this feature is very uncommon among marsupials. It allowed the animal to keep its razor-sharp hooks from getting blunt and could help it get a better grip on its prey. Scientists are quite sure that, like today's leopards, the Thylacoleo could climb trees and jump on other animals from above. It was done so fast and stealthily they never knew what hit them. The creature's rear feet support this theory. The first toe there was reduced, but the foot had a rough pad like what modern-day possums have. It allowed them to have a better grip while climbing. Right after scientists found the first skull of the Megalania, this animal was classified as a lizard. That's why its name translates to small groomer. But after they discovered more complete fossils, it turned out that the Megalania was a giant turtle. But that's not all. It was one of the largest land turtles to ever have existed. The main reason researchers initially believed the creature to be a lizard was the fact that its skull was adorned with a series of spikes. It's something the modern-day horned lizard can boast. But even after discovering the true nature of the Megalania, scientists still don't know how to properly catalog it. It might have been a creature that folded its neck under its spine, or it could have folded it to the side. Beside those defensive mechanisms on its head, the Megalania was also equipped with a spiked tail, which was probably used to prevent predators from attacking the animal from behind. Most species of the Megalania disappeared around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago because of humans who hunted them to extinction in both Australia and on the surrounding islands. It took around 2 centuries for these turtles to go extinct in that region of the globe. The Megalania was a giant Australian lizard that existed at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. It looked like a Komodo dragon and the Australian monitor lizard, which are both believed to be Megalania's closest living relatives. Fossils tell us that the ancient animal was anywhere from 15 to 26 feet in length. Ow! The youngest fossil remains of this ancient Australian monitor lizard date back to about 50,000 years ago. The first indigenous settlers must have encountered Megalania, which led to the lizard's extinction. Originally, scientists thought that the Megalania was the only member of the genus Megalania, but these days it belongs to the genus Venomous, which means that the prehistoric creature is closely related to other Australian monitor lizards. Our next giant creature on our list was once dubbed an ostrich on steroids. I mean, look at it. It was the last of the thunderbirds to go extinct in Australia. The Geoglyphs lived on the continent at the same time as early humans. They might have coexisted for 15,000 years or so before the huge bird eventually disappeared. This theory has some proof. The bird's fossils found along with human artifacts. Some cave paintings also depict flightless birds similar to the Geoglyphs in size and shape. Although it wasn't the largest bird in Australia, the goose-like creature was still as tall as a grown-up man and weighed around 550 pounds. Even a modern-day ostrich can be dangerous if it feels threatened. Imagine meeting its giant prehistoric relative. Scientists are still arguing about its diet. Many believe the creature was an herbivore, but there's still a chance that the Geoglyphs was a partial scavenger. Its small, stubby wings and powerful hoof-like legs hint that the bird could have been a plant eater. But its huge beak and exceptionally deep lower jaw evoke suspicion. Such features are highly unusual in birds.
The legend goes that a dwarf named Fafnir was famous for his strength and courage. Because of his qualities, he was tasked with protecting their kingdom. Dwarves were known to gather a lot of wealth, so a bit of added security was a must. I mean, they lived in a house made from gold and precious gems. But Fafnir also had another special talent. He was able to shapeshift. Tricked by Loki, the Norse spirit of mischief, Fafnir was taken over by his greed and the shine of his father's treasure. He decided he did not want to share any of it, not even with his father or his brothers. He stole it and ran away all by himself to a place he'd be hard to find, the middle of the desert. To protect his wealth, Fafnir transformed into a huge dragon. His new appearance looked like a huge snake, powerful and scary. His magical powers did not end there though. Because the dragon couldn't fly, he also spread poison all around his new home, so no one had a chance to survive if they wanted to take his gold away. Fafnir was soon defeated by a young hero named Sigurd. The legend of Fafnir tries to explain why family is more important than greed. It also shows the many magical powers dragons possess. But the most interesting part is that it's quite a good example of how dragons came to be in our tales. But hey, this is just one of the many stories mentioning dragons. Just switch on your TV or peek into any bookstore, and you'll surely stumble upon dragons somewhere. Variations of dragon-like creatures have been described in stories from all over the world, from Asia to Northern Europe. Most of these creatures are depicted with reptile-like bodies, wings, and claws. And the scariest trait of them all, they can breathe fire out of their mouths. The name of these creatures comes from the Latin word draconum, which translates to huge serpent. But let's take a trip down memory lane to see how it all started. An Asian historian, for example, discovered some fossils back in the 4th century BCE and decided that he'd stumbled upon dragons. It's easy to understand why he got so confused if you look at a fossilized stegosaurus. It was 30 feet long, 14 feet tall, and covered in armored plates and spikes. The Nile crocodile might have gotten mistaken for a dragon too. It still exists today and lives in sub-Saharan Africa. But it may have been more popular in ancient times. When reaching maturity, Nile crocodiles can grow up to 18 feet long. But that's not all. It can even walk with its body off the ground, and some were even pictured standing on their 2 back legs. Goannas are dragon-like lizards that live in Australia. Large as they are, they also have razor-sharp teeth and claws, and are also known to even produce venom. It's easy to see why goannas may be the source for the Australian version of dragons. When humans first discovered whale bones back in the day, we had no idea these animals lived in the sea. Given their size, we surely must have thought they were dangerous. And because we rarely see whales, if we don't go underwater of course, they were poorly understood and easily mistaken for dragons too. Probably the most interesting source of dragon mythology is actually the human brain. In a book called An Instinct for Dragons, there was a theory which claimed that dragons existed in almost all ancient cultures because we had evolved to fear large predators to survive. We aren't the only mammals to do this. Monkeys have an innate fear of snakes and large cats too, for example. When you combine these natural traits with folklore, you get a lot of dragon stories everywhere, adapted to each region. Reptilian beasts with magical powers date back as far as the origins of human civilization itself. I'm talking about ancient Mesopotamia. Humans back then used to believe in all sorts of creatures, but their head spirit was Marduk, the patron of the city of Babylon. If you look at the artwork from back then, Marduk was depicted with a snake-like dragon at his side. It could be either nice or vengeful, depending on what mood it was in. If you want to sign up to become a dragon, the first thing they'll ask you at the interview will be if you can breathe fire, of course. So scientists have tried to look into some ways that could make it real for dragons to breathe out fire without damaging their throats. To do that, they examined the bombardier beetle. This eccentric insect can pack up some really hot substances in its belly. Once the creature gets bothered by something, it shoots out a fiery load of chemicals. In all fairness, it's not really fire, but it does burn, so it's close enough. Going back to dragons, they'd need to have similar glands in their throats to produce the same effect. But where do dragons come from? They didn't just appear out of nowhere, regardless of the source you consult. Some tales, like that of Fafnir, say that even humans can turn into dragons. But the most popular theory is that dragons start out as eggs. Some sources even draft a series of stages a dragon has to go through during its life. Everything starts with hatching. Dragons are said to eat their way out of those shells and break the sides of the egg. Then there's the wormling stage, which is what dragon specialists, or dragonologists if you like, call a newly hatched dragon. It's still small and weak, a hobbit, and in the Harry Potter series. As for dragons' magical abilities, they also vary a lot. Some were said to have blood with supernatural properties. Some were rumored to be able to speak. Others were famous for their wisdom. A lot of dragons in ancient literature could fly or shapeshift, even into humans. Some real-life creatures got their names thanks to bearing a resemblance to dragons, like the dragonfly that has more than 5,000 subspecies we know about. It got its name from folklore tales, as Europeans in the Middle Ages saw it as an evil insect. Dragonflies were accused of some really nasty things, like biting people's eyes and mouths. But the creature that resembles mythical dragons most is a reptile called the flying dragon. They're seen in wooded areas of Southeast Asia. They don't really have wings per se, but parts of their ribs are elongated to support some extra skin that allows them to leap through the air between trees. Those wings are also brightly colored and contrast with their brown bodies.
You decided to go scuba diving for the first time. The water is clear and the sun is shining on the seabed. You take a few selfies and the fish swimming by when suddenly the ocean goes pitch black. You look up and, oh my, what is that gigantic animal? It's definitely not a shark, not a whale. Is it a turtle? Yup, but fear not, it's not gonna hurt you. If you had lived on this same Earth about 72 million years ago, then maybe this could have really happened to you. Scientists have recently found the fossils of a gigantic marine turtle that could have grown as big as 12 feet. If you don't have any idea of how big that is, let's see some examples. That's the average length of a hippopotamus, 6 golden retrievers, or 2 Michael Jordans stacked on top of each other. The turtle's scientific name is an homage to that old-school sea monster called Leviathan. Maybe you remember this from old-school history lessons. The Leviathan is supposedly a mythical creature that would swallow entire ships or people that were deemed too greedy by the creature. Can you imagine being swallowed by this humongous sea turtle? No, thank you. The fossils of this gigantic creature began to be excavated between 2016 and 2021, all the way in northeastern Spain. The first fossil was located by a hiker in the Spanish Pyrenees, and it was around 8 inches long. The pelvis of this turtle alone measured around 35 inches. It would definitely be one of the biggest turtles today if it hadn't gone extinct. FYI, the largest living sea turtles today can reach up to 6 feet in length, which is already pretty big. Now, how about a gigantic prehistoric scorpion? I bet most people here are not huge fans of these creatures, especially since they're poisonous, which is why the thought of a 9-foot-long aquatic scorpion might be the stuff of nightmares. Let's just say that if they hadn't gone extinct some 400 million years ago, lakes and rivers would be much more dangerous places for humans today. These gigantic insects were considered to be apex predators in their time, hunting everything from fish to other animals, even of their own kind. Yikes! I got goosebumps just imagining these creatures. Should we thank the asteroid that hit our planet now or later on in this video? Another prehistoric animal that would shock humans if it were still alive is the so-called Megatherium, a gigantic sloth. This huge sloth is believed to have grown up to 20 feet long, and its weight could be up to 8,000 pounds. It was found in the woodlands and grasslands of South America. The creature used to stand on its 2 feet in order to reach leaves on high branches. These giant sloths had huge claws. They helped them climb trees. I gotta say, I feel uncomfortable imagining these elephant-sized sloths climbing trees. Oh, of course, some dinosaurs will make our super-sized creatures list. But before that, here's a fun fact. Did you know some dinosaurs are still alive today? Scientists have proven that birds are classified as theropod dinosaurs. Such infamous creatures as the T-Rex and Velociraptor belonged to this group. I'm sure you've heard these names even before you watched Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor is that scary dino that breaks into the kitchen. Well, they evolved, gained some feathers, and turned into various species of birds we know today. That means that any bird from chickens to those little blue ones is a direct descendant of dinosaurs. Now, does the name Spinosaurus ring a bell? You can see this huge dinosaur in some museums today. Its fossils, I mean. The Spinosaurus was one of the biggest land predators to walk Earth. Actually, to walk its land and water, since scientists believe that this dino was semi-aquatic. It fed mostly on meat, which means humans would be its natural prey if it lived today. This meat-eating dino lived around 90 to 100 million years ago. It was about 60 feet long, 12 feet high, and weighed up to 22 tons. Its head was around the size of 8 bowling balls and was shaped like a crocodile's face. Basically, the Spinosaurus was a big African elephant with the face of a crocodile. Just kidding. But that would look funny though, wouldn't it? A much more attractive dino was this guy. It's considered to be the largest dinosaur that has ever lived on our planet. What made it so big was its extremely long neck and very long tail. You wouldn't want to stand behind this creature, believe me. If it decided to swish its tail, you'd get catapulted very far away. This creature lived around 100 million years ago, and its fossils were first found in Argentina around 2012. The dino measured 120 feet from head to tail, which made it almost as big as an American football field in width. And have I mentioned it weighed almost as much as a space shuttle? A staggering 75 tons. If it had been a carnivore, it would have probably been the greatest predator. But this big guy was a peaceful herbivore that had such a long neck that it could eat leaves from high trees. Cute, right? We must also talk about the Shastasaurus. As the name suggests, this animal is popularly known as the Mount Shasta lizard. Even though it was a marine reptile and probably never set foot on the mountain itself, this dino was usually around 23 feet long, but there was a specific strand of this species that could get as big as 69 feet long, about the size of the great blue whale. This made it the biggest marine reptile to have ever lived. A fun fact about the Shastasaurus is that scientists believe it didn't even have teeth, which means it could only feed on soft-bodied prey, such as squid, for example. The next animal on our list is the blue whale. Believe it or not, the biggest living animal on Earth actually started small. These days, the average mature blue whale can reach up to 100 feet in length and weigh up to 200 tons. That's more or less the weight of 40 elephants put together, or 30 Tyrannosaurus rexes, or 2,670 average-sized people. Blue whales have to eat up to 50 million calories per day to support that body. That's the equivalent of 30,000 Big Macs, just FYI. But blue whales weren't always this big. They actually evolved from a four-legged mammal that lived on Earth around 48 million years ago. Their ancestor was called Pakicetus, and it was only 6 feet long. Here's a fun fact. To be able to live in the water as one does today, the blue whale had to go through some intense adaptations. A blue whale can replace up to 80 to 90% of oxygen in its lungs each time it takes a breath. A human replaces only up to 15% for comparison. It allows these animals to dive for up to 1 hour at a time, down to a staggering depth of 330 feet. Elephants were bound to make the list. Elephants are currently the largest land animals on Earth. They can grow to be about 13 feet tall and weigh up to 7 tons. That's pretty small if we compare it to the other animals that once lived on Earth, right? But if we placed a 6-foot-tall human next to an elephant, we'll see it's not at all that small. African elephants are bigger than their close relatives, Asian elephants, and they have a similar lifespan to humans, up to 70 years. Pokemon might have made us collectively wish that salamanders were real-life dragons, although they're not. They can still be pretty cool though. There's a giant species of salamander that is known to be the largest living amphibian. They can grow to be as long as a regular-sized human, reaching up to 6 feet. I bet that wouldn't be a pleasant underwater encounter.
Wait, don't tell me that life on Earth has bubbled for about 3.5 billion years, and the biggest creature we got is the blue whale? I mean, not bad, but that doesn't sound nearly as fun as those cool giant creatures you get to see in movies. Yeah, you recognize the iconic roar here. It appeared on TV, in comic books, in video games, and in cinema. I mean, come on. It even got its own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on its 50th birthday. So, what would it take to get good old Godzilla from the TV screen to our streets? And we're talking about the beast that's really gigantic. In the original film from 1954, Godzilla was thought to be 164 feet tall. This was the perfect height for the monster to just peer over the biggest buildings in Tokyo at the time. But as further movies came, Godzilla became bigger and bigger. In theory, this would be the biggest animal that could exist and not end up crushed by the gravitational field of our planet. Even if we're talking about some tiny Godzilla of, let's say, 14,000 tons. To take the gravitational force of our planet and carry such weight, Godzilla must have some incredibly strong bones. And as an object gets bigger, its volume will actually increase faster than its surface area. Okay, wait, let's start small. So, cells are the building blocks of life, and they come in all shapes and sizes. But the thing is, cells have a problem when they try to grow too big. As they grow, their surface area, the outside, doesn't keep up with their volume, which means the inside. It's like having a big mouth but a tiny stomach. You can't digest all the food you want to eat. Why haven't I learned that already? Especially when I open my fridge for a midnight snack. So, if cells get too big, they can't get enough nutrients in and waste out fast enough. It would be like living in a very big house, but with just one tiny door to go in and out. Plus, that's not their only problem. Cells also need to be able to divide and replicate, and this task gets tricky as they get bigger. They need this thing called microtubules for that. It's sort of like a skeleton that gives them structure. But don't worry, evolution is a foxy little thing. There are some cells out there, like a specific type of invasive algae, that have found ways to break the rules and get really big. And they don't even need to divide to do that. This algae could pass as an aquatic fern that has fronds up to 31 inches long. But what you're looking at is just one big cell. It has multiple nuclei, though, which are like the control centers of cells. Plus, there are even some bacteria that are living in a symbiotic relationship with the organism, which means they help each other out when necessary. It's like having a bunch of different rooms inside one big house, with some roommates living there that help around from time to time. Then there's a monster algae known as the sailor's eyeball, which is like a giant ball of green slime. It can grow up to 2 inches in diameter, but is also considered to be just a single cell. My personal favorite would be this one. Again, we're talking about a single cell, but check out its stem and cap. It looks like a tiny little umbrella. It can grow up to 4 inches tall, which is definitely not bad for a single cell. Most cells are too small to see with the naked eye, but these fellas don't hesitate to break the rules. Now, when it comes to animals getting really big, there's a limit to their size. It's like trying to build a really tall tower. Eventually, it'll become too heavy and the base won't be able to support the weight anymore. Similarly, when an animal gets really big, its bones and muscles have to evolve to support all that weight, and it becomes more and more difficult to do so. In one of the movies, Godzilla was 390 feet tall. At that size, it would be really difficult for its heart to pump blood to its brain. And if it was a reptile, Godzilla would need to spend all of its time lying in the sun to stay warm. So we'd have to hide in the shadows, hoping some bigger animals that live in warm areas could keep it full. If Godzilla was a mammal, though, it would generate too much body heat and end up cooking itself. The biggest land animals we know of were sauropods, a type of dinosaur with a really long neck and tail. They could grow up to 131 feet long and weigh up to 70 tons, which could be as heavy as 10 elephants. Evolution was pretty efficient when it had to come up with its body plan. Sauropods ate plants. They had a smart way of eating that allowed them to stay in one spot and still find enough food. They could move their long necks around to reach plants, so they didn't have to walk around too much or waste too much energy. Yeah, my kind of folks. That's impressive, but let's get realistic. Not many giant animals are happy to eat salad for dinner. If you had a giant beast such as Godzilla, you can expect it to go after its prey. And that becomes too hard for its body to support all that weight and perform all the necessary activities. The largest meat-eating dinosaurs were still pretty big, but not as big as the sauropods. The biggest one we know of is a fella called Spinosaurus, which was about 50 feet long. It managed to survive by eating fish and some other creatures that lived in the water. It would be so cool to have Godzilla in real life, if you have some safe basement where it won't find you, of course. But it's not likely some animal could really get bigger than our beloved sauropod. At least, not without running into some serious physical limitations. And have you ever wondered how big a plant could get? It turns out some trees have already reached amazing heights, such as the General Sherman, the largest living tree on the planet. It's more than 275 feet tall and has nearly 53,000 cubic feet of wood. It's gigantic, but still a little bit smaller than the Lindsay Creek French tree, the biggest tree ever recorded. It was a coast redwood 390 feet tall and had a volume of more than 90,000 cubic feet, which is as big as some skyscrapers. But it ain't easy for plants to get big either. When they're tall, it's tricky for them to get water from the roots to the leaves. Redwoods have a couple of tricks up their sleeves, though. For example, they absorb moisture from fog through their leaves. Plus, they have a wide base that gives them more support. If we want to build taller buildings, we also need to think about the challenges plants face, like how to build a good base that will support the structure and transport water and nutrients. If we're not just looking for height, we can take a peek at other massive organisms on our home planet, such as Pando. This is a male aspen forest in Utah that covers 107 acres and is basically one giant organism. It weighs almost 6,000 tons and is one of the biggest organisms on Earth. Perfect salad bowl for Godzilla. I mean, plants aren't the only organisms that can grow to massive sizes. There are fungi, like the honey mushroom, that can grow into a network of tiny threads called hyphae. They tend to spread out over big areas, and it's like a pretty big underground web, connecting everything together. One specimen in Michigan covers 90 acres and weighs about 400 tons. Now that's a lot of mushrooms.
Mirror check. You've got your beige parka on, your chisel is packed, and your overnight plane ride to Saudi Arabia is booked. You know what this means, right? Unfortunately, you weren't cast in the remake of Dune. It just means that you're ready to go explore the world's largest desert areas in the hopes of uncovering prehistoric secrets about our ancestors. Let's get one thing straight. If you ever thought that deserts were empty spaces, think again. They might be filled with sand as far as the eye can see, but they also hold a lot of history, you know, because before humans settled down in cities and towns, we were nomadic people, and we traveled all around the globe looking for food, water, and shelter. So we had to come up with some interesting stuff to survive. Like this thing that was found in the desert of Saudi Arabia. Do you have any idea what this could have been? Over many years, scientists have discussed the origins and use of huge structures such as these ones. It seems our Neolithic ancestors were way smarter than we gave them credit for. They didn't spend all their hours around the fire carving weapons out of stone. No, they were also practicing their architectural skills. These huge stone structures are called desert kites, because if you look at them from a distance, well, they sort of look like kites. Archaeologists have arrived at the consensus that these kites were used to lure animals in. This way, it would make it easier for our ancestors to guarantee their week's food. But that's not all. Take a look at these monolithic structures right here. They show us that our ancestors probably drew on rocks, the blueprint of what they were going to build on the ground. Just like modern-day architects, desert kites could be miles long, so they drew out a plan before actually building them. The most surprising feature of all is that these kites were built even before things such as Stonehenge. We're talking around 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. Over the last decade, scientists have been able to identify over 6,000 desert kites spread across the Middle East and West and Central Asia. If you don't think this huge, try building something this large without the help of any drones. It looks like a pretty difficult feat to me. And apparently, Saudi Arabia's desert is filled with more amazing things. Scientists have found mysterious stone structures that are older than the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. So of course, you can't wait to go check that out. Can we all agree that carrying around heavy rocks to build a pyramid without the help of modern technology sounds absurd? I mean, how on earth did they do it? Now imagine turning back the clock about 2,000 years into the past and finding humans that built similar gigantic structures in isolated areas. Take a look at these so-called mustadils. They are rectangular structures built from piled-up stones, found over 77,000 square miles. Some archaeologists believe that these monuments were used for ritualistic purposes, maybe processions of some kind, where people would walk from one end of the plateau to the other. I'd be down for that. Now let's move on to another deserted area. We're entering the world-famous Sahara Desert landscape. Isn't it beautiful? Here, you're about to unravel an ancient mystery, something that took years for researchers to solve. Fun fact, the Sahara Desert is the world's largest hot desert. It spans over 3 million square miles, which would be like putting 1,000 times the country of Hawaii next to each other. We say it's the largest hot desert because the world's largest desert area is Antarctica. But we all know temperatures over there are freezing, not the typical image of when we think of a desert. Deep into the desert, near the Algerian town of Foggara at Zua, something strange was found. For decades, these tiny dots appeared on images of Google Earth, but nobody could explain what they were. Some scientists were sure that these circles are the result of oil activity in the region. Others guessed that these were ancient foggaras or ancient water wells. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles and miles in a straight line. The strange thing is that they are always far away from any town, road, or human activity in general. So what was or is their purpose? If you had to take a guess, what would you say? Remember we talked about how our ancestors had to be creative in order to survive in the desert? Let's try to walk in their shoes for a minute. Imagine you're a nomadic hunter-gatherer living in a desert area. You spend your days basking in the hot sun, trying to count all the grains of sand around you. But you also need to eat and drink water. But how on earth do you get water in a desert? Sure, you can hope to keep running into oasis every week or so, but that seems a bit risky, doesn't it? That's why North African people invented the so-called foggaras. The foggaras are a 2,500-year-old irrigation system. Locals would dig deep wells in elevated areas, wells deep enough to tap into underground water. Then, they would dig parallel shafts at regular distances. This way, the water would flow from the main well down into all the shafts and irrigate entire areas. Travelers could stop by the shafts and quench their thirst. They could also raise livestock and tend to crops. Pretty clever, huh? As much as these holes did look like foggaras, a little bit of research would show you that they're not. You see, these shafts were built in a line, and not in a circular shape like the ones we're looking at now. So maybe it has something to do with the second option? Maybe these desert holes were related to oil activity in the region? Let's have a look at the holes up close and personal. From Google Earth, they don't seem that big, but in real life, they are huge craters. The tip to uncovering what they are is hidden beneath the sand. If you were one of the researchers originally uncovering the truth behind this mystery, you would have found something unique hidden in the sand. Old dynamites and vintage sardine cans. Putting the pieces of the puzzle together, scientists found that these sardine cans were a model from the 1950s and 1960s. It seems that entire teams from that decade would camp out while they surveyed the area for oil. And what about the dynamites? These were used for seismic surveying. This is an old technique, used to identify if there is oil and gas beneath the Earth's surface. Still in North Africa, you find out about another desert mystery worth exploring. Near the city of Tiaret, southwest of Algeria's capital, one runs into 13 peculiar monuments. These structures are also called jedars, and yes, I am aware of how much that may sound like a Star Wars reference. They are pyramid-like in their shapes, and as far as scientists know, they were used as final resting places for the people who lived in the region. Can you guess who these were? Most likely the Berber nomads. And since we're talking about ancient stuff, they were probably built between the 4th and 7th centuries CE. Once scientists began to explore the insides of these monuments, they found they were pretty big inside. They found large underground vaults, chambers, and labyrinth-like corridors that gave way to over 20 compartments. It could take you up to 2 hours to walk around in them, and apparently our ancestors also used its walls to depict images of animals and hunting scenes. There's no definite proof of what these jedars were used for, though. This is so neat, huh? I'm sure that our world's desert is filled with many more mysterious things for us to unravel. I guess I'll see you next time so that we can continue our explorations.
AI can drive a car, design trendy clothes, give you emotional support, and it looks like it can also help us find answers to centuries-long mysteries. Researchers from Yamagata University Institute of Nazca and IBM Japan used a deep learning AI model to find new Nazca lines. Those are distinct white lines on a rusty red background that you can see from a plane while flying over the deserts of southern Peru. Scientists have tried to decipher the meaning of the Nazca lines ever since they were first discovered in the 1920s. There are straight lines, rectangles, triangles, and swirls. There are also some giant drawings. You can see a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird. The 4 recently discovered geoglyphs, which is the scientific word for those drawings, show a humanoid-like figure holding a club, a fish, a bird, and a pair of legs. What is the hidden symbolism of all that? And why did the Nazca people decide to draw a humanoid in the desert? And did they even know who humanoids were? Let's dig into history to find some answers. The representatives of the ancient Nazca culture created their famous lines more than 2,000 years ago. The geoglyphs have stood the test of time thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert. Scientists found that to form the lines, the Nazca people scraped off the top layer of pebbles, revealing the contrasting soil beneath. The soil's color varies from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray. It makes it look like the lines are constantly changing appearance. It looks like the creators first made small-scale models and then enlarged them to create the full-scale designs we see today. In total, there are more than 800 straight lines, around 300 geometric figures, and 70 animals and plant designs. You can find the first mention of the lines in the 16th century Chronicle of Peru, where they were first described as trail markers in the desert. Since you can't really study the lines and their symbolism from the ground, those geoglyphs only became world famous only in the 1930s. It was the start of the era of commercial planes, so more and more people could witness the lines from their window seats and spread the word. During his research a decade later, Professor Paul Kosuk noticed that one of the lines aligned with the setting sun on the day after the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. He supposed that the lines had some astronomical significance. German researcher Maria Reiche, who got the nickname the Lady of the Lines, supported the theory that the geoglyphs served as a calendar and some sort of astronomical purposes. She spent 40 years studying the lines and literally swept them inch by inch. She also moved into a small house close to the lines to protect them from unwanted visitors. And that's how the Nazca Lines mystery was solved. Just kidding. In the 1970s, American researchers began to question astronomical theory. In a region like Nazca, One of the driest places on Earth, with only around 20 minutes of rain per year, water is a real treasure. So the straight lines and trapezoids could have something to do with it. They could have been an ancient version of Google Maps, pointing at locations for rituals that the local people organized to get some water and help their crops grow. The images of animals in the Andes region are also related to water. Spiders are thought to be a sign of rain. Hummingbirds symbolize fertility, and monkeys living in the Amazon mean an abundance of water. That could explain the choice of symbols in the desert, but there's no strong proof to support this theory. So the work on explaining the meaning of those mysterious geoglyphs is going on. In the 21st century, the Nazca lines have become the research ground for archaeologists from Yamagata University. Masato Sakai, a professor of archaeology, together with others on the team, are using high-resolution aerial photography and drones to discover and catalog the lines. They found images of humans, camelids, birds, orca whales, cats, and snakes, most likely created between 100 before current era and 300 current era. Some of the images are around 10 to 20 feet long, and that's why they were pretty tricky to notice. The largest geoglyphs are 1,200 feet across, which is about the height of the Empire State Building. The researchers believe the Nazca lines were a form of communication in the desert for their creators. The linear ones pointed the direction from valley to valley. The ones drawn on slopes seem to have been drawn along ancient pathways between settlements. Professor Sakai explains that discovering new lines is tricky. Some of them are so poorly preserved that it's hard to spot them in aerial photos. There are also irrigation systems and roads all across the Nazca region, and it complicates the task. And that's where AI comes in handy. The team showed it pictures of previously explored Nazca lines so it could learn what to look for. Then, AI went through tons of footage taken from planes and satellites and also laser data from previous surveys to identify the lines scientists hadn't found before. The system works 21 times faster than humans, and it made some curious discoveries. Scientists then traveled to the locations it chose to verify the findings. In 2019, AI helped to discover a humanoid-shaped character with a rectangular head who is holding a stick and wearing a headdress. It became a real puzzle for the scientists trying to understand the creature's role in ancient society. The little guy is neighbors with another famous geoglyph. It's a hermit, which is a subgroup of hummingbirds that lives in the forested regions of northern and eastern Peru. The largest of the recently found geoglyphs is a pair of legs. It's more than 250 feet across, about 4/5 as tall as Big Ben. Could be an homage to some ancient supermodel. The fish and the bird are around 4 times smaller. Why they are where they are is still a mystery. Listing new geoglyphs isn't the only way AI is helping scientists. It's doing a lot of good for astronomy. It analyzes vast amounts of astronomical data and uses its algorithms to identify patterns, classify celestial objects, and even predict new events. For example, AI models have been developed to detect and categorize galaxies, search for exoplanets, and identify rare cosmic phenomena. It also helped analyze data obtained by the Kepler mission to discover new Earth-sized planets circling other stars. AI is also transforming the field of chemistry. Machine learning algorithms can predict chemical reactions, discover new compounds, and optimize chemical processes. All of this helps scientists save a lot of time and resources in the labs. If you've ever written a thesis, you know that analyzing vast chunks of information can take forever. Now imagine you need to analyze the archives of the British Library's national newspaper. It's piles and piles of history. So, researchers are teaming up with the curators to develop special software that can analyze the vast amounts of data extracted from these collections. Computational linguists and historians will be able to delve deep into the past and get some insights into changes in society and culture. They'll focus on key periods and track how advancements in technology shaped various aspects of society. AI even helps in the conservation of seals. it's really expensive and challenging to monitor certain species of those cutie pies living in the sea ice zone. Using high-resolution satellites, researchers can now identify the seals in photos, which already helps. But manually counting seals across huge areas of ice is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle of a blue sky consisting of 1 million pieces. It takes a lot of patience, and different analysts come up with different results. Machine learning algorithms can be trained to recognize and distinguish seals in satellite imagery and count them automatically. Researchers can then use this accurate data to monitor seal populations over time and study their behavior and habitat more effectively.
Let me take you to a place that seems to be out of this world. Life inside this cave has been isolated from the outside world for about 5.5 million years, and it does show. See for yourself. Due to such a long isolation, the conditions inside the Moval Cave are like nowhere else on our planet. A unique ecosystem is flourishing there, even though there is a severe lack of sunlight inside the cave, and the air is toxic. The cave, located a few miles west of the Black Sea in Romania, was first discovered in 1986. Nowadays, you can only visit it if you have special permission. Plus, the central caverns are guarded naturally by narrow limestone tunnels and vertical shafts. So, if you're no stranger to claustrophobia, you'd probably better not enter this place. In the depth of the cave, the air has twice less oxygen than the air outside. Instead, it contains a lot of carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, so not the freshest air you can breathe. It's also pitch black inside the cavern. But despite, or should I say thanks to, this cocktail of extremely harsh conditions, the site is a true goldmine for biologists. Shockingly, life seems to be booming here. In a 1996 study, scientists identified 48 species, and 33 of them were unique to the cave. Most of the creatures inhabiting the cave are tiny, with long limbs and antennae that help them navigate in the dark. They have no vision and lack pigment, and it makes sense. Why would you need to be able to see if you live in total darkness? And why would you need to be pretty and colorful with no one to see you? Now, I'm going to take you to another cave. It's no less amazing, but looks very different. This is the Giant Crystal Cave, aka the Cave of the Crystals, in Mexico. These ginormous crystals were found in 2000 by a mining company after the water was pumped out of the cave. 2 miners then saw the crystals after entering the drying cave on foot. These awe-inspiring crystals are actually massive gypsum pillars hidden 984 feet underground. They're anchored to the walls and the floor of the scorching hot cave. Scientists estimate that the crystals could have been already growing for 500,000 years. That's why many of them are so long and wide that you can walk across them. Unfortunately, visiting this wonder of nature is impossible at the moment. But maybe it's for the better, since the Giant Crystal Cave is a dangerous place that can easily turn into a trap. For tens of thousands of years, it was filled with groundwater, which was originally pushed upward into the opening by a magma chamber located in the depths of our planet. The magma under the cave kept the water hot, but eventually the temperature of the water dipped below 136 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, the water started to fill with calcium and sulfate, whose particles began to recombine into gypsum. And then, white-tinted crystals took over the cave. And since they stayed underwater, they were able to keep growing. You don't have to fly to space to take a closer look at a black hole. Scientists have found something very similar to black holes in the southern Atlantic Ocean. A black hole has such an enormous gravitational pull that once something gets pulled inside, it doesn't have any chance to escape. Even light can't get out of a black hole. But ocean black holes seem to be almost as powerful as their space relatives. But instead of catching the light, they do the same with water. Ocean eddies are massive whirlpools that spin against the main current. They usually swirl billions of tons of water, and most of them are larger than a city. These whirlpools are so powerful that nothing trapped by them can escape. But the scariest thing is that you might not even notice heading into one of them. These things are so huge that you won't spot their boundaries until it's too late. When scientists started exploring ocean vortices with the help of satellites, they discovered the borders of several eddies. After that, they managed to prove that, mathematically, these whirlpools are the same as mysterious black holes in space. Massive eddies are surrounded by super tight barriers where fluid moves in closed loops. Even water can't get out from the inside of these loops. That's why tight ocean vortices play the role of enormous containers. Water inside them can be totally different from the ocean surrounding an eddy. And I'm not only talking about its temperature. The salt content inside and outside a whirlpool often differs as well. On the thin Curonian spit splitting the Baltic Sea from the Curonian Lagoon, there is one of the most bizarre places on Earth. Locals call this area the Dancing Forest because pine trees in this forest have shockingly unusual shapes. They twist in spirals and circles along the ground. There are some theories why it could be happening, of course. Some people claim that huge amounts of positive and negative energies once clashed in that spot. More down-to-earth individuals believe that the reason is geological. Sandy soil in the area is too unstable to hold trees growing upright. The most popular is the idea that strong winds blowing from the water influence the shape of the trees. In any case, experts haven't come to the final conclusion yet. Look at these underwater crop circles. For the first time, they were spotted in 1995, close to southern Japan's coast. Local divers called these 7 feet wide structures mystery circles. The enigma had been plaguing many minds for almost 16 years until the culprit was finally caught. Imagine the researchers' surprise when it turned out to be a male pufferfish. The fish needs a bit more than a week to build one circle, and the aesthetics are obviously crucial. A male is swimming inside the circle, digging valleys in the sand with its fins. But that's not all. The fish also use shells and corals to decorate particular parts of their circles. This whole build-a-circle thing has a practical purpose as well. The way a male fish swims pushes the sand toward the center of the circle and creates a mound which later serves as a nest. The next mystery on our list is in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there's a giant sinkhole. That's the Great Blue Hole. It's about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long time ago, this hole was a cave. But then rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you'll descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it will become. You'll see tons of stalactite-filled caves there, but entering them is extremely dangerous, unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you'll notice that the water is shimmering. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. You might want to turn back right now. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths. There was an old Amazonian legend that told about the river that was so hot that it boiled. And it was believed to be just a legend until Peruvian geoscientist Andres Russo questioned if the river could be real. All experts denied such a possibility. After all, hot rivers do exist, but only in the areas where there are volcanoes. As for the part of the country mentioned in the legend, there are no volcanoes in that region. But Andres Russo was too dedicated to give up. And in 2011, he finally located the river from the legends. The water in it was indeed steaming hot. Its temperature was 186 degrees Fahrenheit, not boiling, but pretty close to this point. But what shocked the researcher the most was the size of the river. One could think that the almost boiling water was the result of the activity of an underwater hot spring. But thermal pools are always small, while the river is 20 feet deep and flows for almost 4 miles. This is the only river of its kind on our planet.
A comfortable abode with a gorgeous view of the Mediterranean Sea will serve as a perfect rain shelter. Well, this is what a real estate advertisement might have looked like for Neanderthals 100,000 years ago. Welcome to the weird and wonderful caves you could live in, or not. Of course, back then, neither real estate and advertising had been invented yet. Never mind the fact that Neanderthals couldn't build houses and often lived in caves. Yet, one of those caves looks an awful lot like a residential building. It's situated inside a high limestone cape called the Rock of Gibraltar. If the Neanderthals had had an economy, the caves inside this rock would have cost a bundle. Navigators discovered it in 1907. They just spotted a big hole inside the fortified rock. For many years, scientists have studied this place and found some traces of Neanderthals. They discovered ancient tools in the cave and bones of old animals. But the coolest thing was they found 4 caves inside the rock. It was like a residential complex. Neanderthals lived alongside neighbors and helped each other hunt and fish. They created feather decorations and painted abstract drawings on the walls. Imagine our ancient predecessors hanging out in these caves 100,000 years ago. And now scientists hang out there and study the primeval past of Neanderthals in detail. At the end of 2021, archaeologists uncovered a gap inside one of the caves leading to an unknown tunnel. They crawled through this hole and opened a new space under the cave roof. This place has been closed off from the outside world for over 40,000 years. And it seems it was one of the most prestigious apartments in the entire mountain complex. It has high ceilings with ancient stalactites. The ruined stone curtains divided the apartment into several rooms. Scientists also found the remains of ancient animals and scratches on the walls. It seems that Neanderthals had never lived here, but they used to visit this place. Archaeologists found the shell of a sea snail called dog whelk. One of the Neanderthals brought it here for some reason, but the primary owners of this place were hyenas. These caves show that Neanderthals were closer to humans than to monkeys. They had a way of life and even some customs. There's still a lot of work ahead, and scientists hope to find new rooms inside this rock. Meanwhile, in 2003, archaeologists discovered another early dwelling on the Isle of Flores in Indonesia. Among the green jungle, they found a cave with ancient tools. At first, everyone thought the human ancestors lived here, but then scientists discovered an unusual skeleton of an adult. A thorough analysis showed the skeleton belonged to a 30-year-old woman, 3.5 feet tall, just above the waist of an average adult. The woman's weight was equal to the weight of an adult shepherd. The skeleton didn't belong to Neanderthals or Australopithecines. It was a new unknown species, which scientists called Homo floresiensis, or simply the Hobbit. Also, there were remains of unusual ancient animals in the cave. It was an elephant the size of a cow, some large storks, and giant rats. Archaeologists have found out that hobbits were not the owners of this place. The main inhabitants were the rats the size of a cat. Maybe they were fighting the hobbits. Some analysis shows that Homo floresiensis wasn't our direct ancestor. They were in a separate branch of evolution. The hobbit skeleton looks more like that of a monkey than of modern humans. In 2009, in the dense jungle of Vietnam, archaeologists discovered Son Don, the largest cave in the world. If you go inside the cave and shout, you'll hear your echo a long time. In some places, the height of this cave reaches half the height of the Empire State Building, and the total area is larger than one central block of New York. Son Don is one of the 3 caves in the Vietnamese jungle. Many intricate mazes connect these caves. Inside, you can find unique plants and trees that live separately from the outside world. It's a real underground jungle. In some places, you can find collapsed ceilings that let the sunlight in. Besides unusual trees and plants, ancient stalactites hang there. Some limestone deposits are more than 450 million years old. They were here even before dinosaurs appeared. There are also many rivers in the cave. Rainwater coming down from holes in the ceiling has formed them. Fast streams resemble slides in a water park. They lead to unknown underground labyrinths. Scientists have studied only a small part of all these caves. The next unusual cave is in New Zealand. Hundreds of thousands of fireflies live inside. Each of them glows with a blue light. Together, they light up the cave. It may seem to you that you're on another planet, but you can't stay there for a long time. Special air measuring devices are everywhere. Scientists monitor the level of carbon dioxide necessary for the normal existence of fireflies. These insects are sensitive to the environment. If there are many people in the cave, or they stay there too long, the park staff will ask them to leave the place. It's like you're literally stealing oxygen from the fireflies. We've seen some pretty amazing caves so far, but how about a scary one? We're going to the desert of Yemen's Al Mara province. What we're looking for is not a cave, it's just a black hole in the ground, right in the middle of the desert. It's big, the size of a basketball court. It's not its size that could scare you, but what's inside. Scientists are still not sure what it is. From the depths of this black abyss, a disgusting smell of rotten eggs constantly comes out, and sometimes you can hear some strange, frightening sounds. The blackness of the giant hole in Yemen absorbs all the sun's rays, so you won't see what's there even with a powerful flashlight. People flew over this place by helicopter. They filmed using drones and the most powerful lenses, but they didn't catch anything except darkness. It looks like a big ink spot in the middle of golden sand. The locals are afraid to approach this place. They believe the cave leads to another dimension where evil creatures live. At the moment, the giant hole in Yemen is one of the most poorly studied and mysterious phenomenon of nature. How did it appear? How old is it? Where does it lead? Scientists are trying to find the answers to these questions. There are theories that the hole appeared because of construction work. Geologists drilled the soil nearby in search of minerals. It could have caused fluctuations in the Earth's crust and collapsed the surface. But no one can prove this theory, yet. And now, imagine a place where sunlight has not penetrated for more than 5 million years. There's little oxygen, and it's cold and damp. Still, life is born in this place, not only microbes and bacteria, but also something bigger. The living conditions in this cave are very different from the usual ones, so, in a sense, this cave is like another planet. It's the Movial Cave in the southeast of Romania, near the Black Sea. The entrance is a small hole in the ground. Inside, a tunnel leads deep below the surface. The levels of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide are above normal inside the cave. The air here is half as much oxygen as on the surface. People can't be here without an oxygen mask, but other creatures living here can. The cave is home to 48 species of living organisms. 33 of them are unknown. Here you can meet some unusual insects, white snails and white spiders, millipedes with huge whiskers, transparent shrimp, and unique species of leeches. They all live here thanks to the little bacteria autotrophs. They absorb carbon dioxide and release food particles. Bacteria feed on it. Other larger organisms feed on these bacteria, and some bigger organisms eat those little ones. In the end, everyone gets food. In this cave, evolution has created a biological system separate from the rest of the world.
You're flying over the Sahara Desert in a small, light aircraft when you spot something truly weird. It seems to belong to a very different part of the world, the ocean. But what ocean can be huge enough for this monstrous sea star to dwell there? You descend and realize that it's not a sea star. It's a towering dune with a pretty unique shape, and it's not alone. From afar, these magnificent sand structures look a bit like pyramids. They have pointed tops and radiating arms. Called star dunes, they're the most complex and largest desert dunes in the world. They're the tallest of their kind, but that's not the coolest thing about them. Researchers have found similar formations on Mars and even on one of Saturn's moons, Titan. Star dunes aren't super rare, but they're especially widespread in southeastern Morocco, near the border with Algeria. That's where you're flying at the moment, and the breathtaking dune you're marveling at is Megalania, probably the most famous of them all, a giant 330 feet tall. Scientists believe that it formed in less than 1,000 years. How about doing some research to find out more about these unusual formations? There, I see a great spot for landing. Star dunes got their name because of their multi-armed shapes. They form in areas where winds change direction throughout the year. But even though you can find them in different places on our planet, there is just one confirmed star dune in the rock record, the collective record of Earth's development reflected in preserved rocks. The star dune in question is in Scotland, and it's ancient, from about 250 million years ago. That's all we know about super old star dunes. Probably because we don't know what to look for to identify one. Another problem: star dunes often form in remote locations, which makes them extremely difficult to study. Imagine reaching the nearest settlement, then somehow traveling who knows how many miles to the dune itself, and then slogging up several hundred feet of shifting sand. I'll pass. but you can go since you've already landed, and the dune is right here in front of you. Currently, you're in a dune field called Earthship. Lucky for you, this area has long become a popular tourist stop. Look, in the distance, there are hotels and even a good road. Scientists who examined Thylacoleo before you used ground-penetrating radar to find out more about the sand formation. This equipment can detect the tiniest differences in sand grain sizes and water content under the surface of the dune. That's how you can create a picture of its interior layers. Look out! Phew, it was a close call. See this trench? The researchers dug such trenches to take samples of long-buried sands and then examine them. It's a pretty cool process. The thing is, while buried deep inside, the quartz in the sand accumulates radiation coming from natural sources within our planet. We can compare the grains of quartz to minuscule rechargeable batteries. They can store the energy they get from radiation. When researchers bring them to the laboratory, they can make the grains release that energy, which comes out in the form of light. Scientists can measure the brightness and say when the sand enjoyed sunlight for the last time. Now, when those experts who dug the trenches looked inside Thylacoleo, they were shocked. The enormous formation turned out to be very young, for a dune of course. You'd expect a dune that is several hundred feet tall to be pretty old, like thousands or tens of thousands of years. But that wasn't the case. Well, at least not entirely. The upper part of the dune has turned 900 just recently. But look at the sand near the base of the dune. Yep, right there. Well, it was buried there around 12 or 13,000 years ago, representing ancient dunes in the area. Those good old dunes were active for a couple thousand years, and then something went wrong. Because for a whopping 8,000 years, the sand wasn't accumulating there. A mystery? Scientists might have an explanation. You see, the first part of this quiet period occurred during the time when the climate became warm and wet. Yep, even in the Sahara. It happened about 11,700 years ago. It was the end of the last ice age and the beginning of a new era, the Holocene. And guess what? The Sahara went green. It started blooming like your local botanic garden. Plants started popping up all over the place, stabilizing the sand. If you had visited the Sahara during that period, you wouldn't have recognized this place. But you would have likely come across humans wandering marshy landscapes and hunting for food. Researchers have found pottery fragments and stone tools on one side of Thylacoleo. That's true. As sand dunes form and then shift throughout their lives, they swallow and protect ancient remnants of life. Just dig well enough and you might find something that will provide you with a window into the past. It can be ancient fossils, anything from fossilized shells and corals to prehistoric plants. Those can offer precious insights into the history of our planet and the living beings once inhabiting certain regions. Now, it might come as a shock, but in the Sahara Desert, scientists have uncovered well-preserved marine reptiles and fossilized fish within the layers of those ancient sand dunes. They are the remains from the time when the Sahara was covered with a sea millions of years ago. Anyway, it's time to leave that ancient paradise if you want to survive. 4,000 years ago, the wet period came to an end, and the Sahara dried out again. Interestingly, our dune didn't begin building up right away. For some time, sand probably blew through but didn't accumulate. Or the dune could have started growing in a different location. And it's a valid theory since scientists have discovered recently that Thylacoleo shifts around 1.6 feet every year. It also accumulates about 6,400 tons of sand every year. Now, if you've been inspired by your dune trip and are now eager to explore more of them, I've got some unpleasant news for you. Unfortunately, although there might be star dunes locked in sandstones around the globe, they're super tricky to detect. The problem is, dunes are huge, but they lack a single distinguishing feature. So you'd really need large exposed beds of rock if you want to get a wide enough view to identify a star dune. On the bright side, there surely are places where it might be possible to do such research. but you should be ready to know that it might be just a set of various features that look like other dunes. But if you combine them, you'll say, ah, it's likely to be a star dune. Comment below if you'd like to go on a trip in search of a star dune. Meanwhile, we'll continue our journey. You decide to have some rest and start climbing down the side of the dune. That's when you begin hearing it. Terrible, haunting sounds. Are there ghosts nearby? Worry not, you're safe. You might have heard of a phenomenon called singing sands. As you walk down some sandy slopes, you disturb the grains of sand. They rub against each other, producing friction that creates those eerie melodies. With each step, the sand beneath your feet comes alive in a ghostly choir of whistles and whispers. The sounds range from low hums to loud, high-pitched wails, as if an otherworldly symphony is echoing through the dunes. But of course, scientists have their own very practical explanation, attributing this phenomenon to the right atmospheric conditions combined with the unique size, shape, and moisture content of the grains. Now you've almost made it all the way to the bottom of the dune, but beware of slip faces. When a sand dune reaches a certain steepness, it develops a slope. That's the very slip face I was talking about. This slope is usually on the leeward side of the dune and sheltered from the prevailing wind. Sand grains start accumulating on the windward side, slowly creeping along the dune's gentle slope. At one point, they reach the top. Gravity takes over and they start sliding down, triggering a cascading effect. It looks like a miniature sand avalanche, and I wouldn't want to end up in its way.
Brighter green plants might give us a warning when a volcano is stirring. Turns out, unlike earthquakes, which are super unpredictable, volcanoes can sometimes show early signs. Plants growing around volcanoes look healthier when volcanic activity ramps up because they thrive on increased carbon dioxide levels, a gas that volcanoes emit during eruptions and through underground magma. They also turn browner when the volcanic activity peaks, likely due to harmful gases and heat harming the vegetation. Scientists use satellites to figure this all out. They analyzed satellite data spanning from 1984 to 2022. Future changes might be tracked through satellite imagery as well. Now, this isn't easy to measure directly, especially when volcanoes are tucked away in hard-to-reach, lush areas, such as Taal Volcano in the Philippines and Mount Etna in Italy. This way, plants could give us a heads up about volcanic eruptions years before they happen. With this new weird method, we could save nearby communities by enhancing safety measures, minimizing property damage, and improving evacuation plans. Volcanoes and plants are often tied in mysterious ways. For example, volcanic eruptions in Krakatoa, Indonesia, gave a surprising boost to saguaro cacti in Arizona's Sonora Desert, even though they're thousands of miles away. When the infamous Krakatoa volcano erupted in the 19th century, it sent shockwaves around the world and suddenly helped nurture a generation of saguaros. These incredible cacti can be up to 40 feet tall as adults, but they start life as tiny seedlings that struggle to survive in the desert's harsh conditions. However, thanks to the cooler and wetter conditions caused by volcanic eruptions like Krakatoa, they can get unbelievable growth spurts. Chillier summers and milder winters that follow such eruptions create perfect conditions for young saguaro, which usually don't make it due to extreme heat and cold. But volcanoes not only influence plants, they're also Earth's jewelry makers. Deep beneath the surface, in the fiery heart of a volcano, conditions are just right to form dazzling gems. When volcanoes erupt, they can bring these treasures up to the surface. One of the most famous gems created by volcanic activity is the diamond. They're usually found in a rare type of volcanic rock called kimberlite, which forms deep within the Earth under extreme pressure and temperature. Millions of years ago, kimberlite eruptions, small but powerful volcanic events, hauled diamonds from deep within the Earth. This created sources for many of today's diamond mines. Now, these eruptions didn't happen just anywhere, but originated from the stable hearts of continents, known as cratons. They were bursting forth from as deep as 75 miles underground. Fueled by a mix of carbon dioxide and water, they were like natural rockets, blasting through the Earth to form carrot-shaped channels filled with diamond-laden rocks. Recently, scientists have delved into why these eruptions happen. They suggested that the breakup of ancient supercontinents like Pangaea disrupted the mantle's flow underneath, triggering these spectacular kimberlite eruptions. When a volcano that hosts kimberlite erupts, it can propel these precious stones toward the surface, where we eventually find them. There are other gems that can be found in solidified lava, like peridot, a bright green stone that forms in the molten rock of the upper mantle and is brought to the surface by volcanic activity. There's also obsidian, a shiny glass-like rock that forms when lava cools rapidly. And then there are some insane rocks, like the ones that can hold water in them, even in lava. The deeper we dive in volcanoes, the rarer are the gems we can find. If we dive into the thick layer known as the mantle, we might find olivine, a resilient, pretty green mineral that makes up about half of this layer. It loves high temperatures and happily forms in lava, eventually crystallizing into the igneous rocks we find scattered across the Earth's surface thanks to volcanic eruptions. As olivine cools, it starts to crystallize. Sometimes these crystals are tiny, but other times they grow large and can be polished into beautiful gemstones used in jewelry or industrial processes like metal casing. But as we venture deeper, about 250 miles down, olivine undergoes a fascinating transformation. Here we encountered the layer that's called the transition zone. In the transition zone, the pressure is intense and the heat is on the rise. In this place, olivine morphs into exotic materials like wadleysite and ringwoodite. They show a lovely blue-green hue and a glossy sheen. While they're too rare and small for jewelry, they have a unique ability to hold water within their structures, not as droplets, but as hydrogen and oxygen components, making up to 3% of their volume. Later, it turned out that the transition zone is not just a pressure cooker for minerals, it's a giant sponge, holding a vast underground water reservoir. This was a groundbreaking discovery. You get the pun? This hidden water doesn't form an ocean as we know it, but suggests vast amounts of water are stored deep within the Earth. Volcanoes can help us learn more about life not only on our planet, but on others as well. In the fiery heart of Costa Rica's Poas volcano lies Laguna Caliente. This hydrothermal crater lake is among the most brutal environments on Earth. We've got a whole bunch here: scalding temperatures, toxic minerals, and water so acidic it can corrode metal. But despite all that, there's a few tough microorganisms that manage to thrive in these conditions. And this remarkable survival has caught the attention of scientists because it might just hold clues about life on Mars. Scientists are studying these extreme microbes. Turns out they've developed a myriad of genetic adaptations to withstand their harsh surroundings. They have genes that help them process everything, from sulfur and iron to carbon and bioplastic granules. All these things could be crucial in environments as challenging as Mars. NASA's Perseverance rover is currently exploring the crater rim of Jezero crater on Mars. Previously, we looked for Martian life signs in places like old stream beds and river deltas. However, the discovery of Laguna Caliente suggests that we should probably look for life in the remnants of ancient Martian hot springs as well. These spots might have once had the right cocktail of heat, water, and energy sources that are thought to be essential for kickstarting biology. Volcanoes can help planets in many ways, but they can also destroy life. Scientists believe that volcanic activity was one of the main reasons for at least 3 of Earth's 5 mass extinctions. Take the mass extinction of dinosaurs. We're used to blaming it on the Chicxulub meteorite, but there's a chance it could have been caused by volcanoes. The consequences of the eruptions can be horrifying. Mount Tambora, located on the Indonesian island of Sumbawa, erupted in 1815 and was the most powerful eruption ever recorded in history. This massive eruption was so strong it ejected between 8 to 11 cubic miles of material. It was so loud that the sounds of the eruption were heard as far away as Sumatra, over 1,600 miles distant. Before its catastrophic eruption, Tambora had been dormant for centuries, and its magma chamber slowly cooled and crystallized. This process built up immense pressure inside the volcano. It was eventually released in a series of terrifying events starting on April 5, 1815. The climax came on April 10th, when massive plumes of ash and pumice were thrown into the atmosphere. The aftermath of the eruption was dire. Tsunamis devastated the surrounding area. It's estimated that around 4,600 people passed away immediately from the eruption itself, with ash fallouts affecting air quality and water sources across the region. This event came down in history as the year without a summer. This was due to the vast amount of sulfur dioxide Tambora ejected into the stratosphere. It created a veil of aerosols that reflected sunlight and significantly lowered global temperatures. A similar thing happened to our planet 66 million years ago, during the dinosaur extinction. The sky turned black for months. I mean, I wasn't there, but that's what they say. When we think of active volcanoes, one region comes to mind: the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. 3/4 of Earth's volcanoes sit within this belt. Compare the area to Australia, which doesn't have any volcanic activity. The old continent of Europe is also calm, or at least we like to think so. Can you guess what the most active volcano in Europe is? If you thought of Mount Etna on the island of Sicily in Italy, you were right. The volcano has erupted about 200 times and has been far from sleeping in recent decades. The last time this happened was in August 2023. The highest mountain in the Mediterranean is 500 million years old. But in Iceland, there is a much younger volcano. It sprang into action on the 10th of July 2023. In the afternoon, 3 fissures appeared in the ground on a peninsula in the southwest of the island. This was at a base of a small mountain peak. Its name means Little Ram in the local language. The volcano spewed molten lava high into the air. There were also gas plumes in the area. But the scientific community wasn't surprised by the event. They already knew about the volcanic area that stretches between the cities of Reykjavik and Keflavik. Its name is hard to pronounce. Hey, I want to buy a vowel. It had already erupted during the previous 2 summers. This activity came after 8 centuries of dormancy. In the days leading up to the latest eruption, seismologists, the scientists who study earthquakes, recorded over 12,000 tremors. When the ground opened up in July, the fissures were over 1.5 miles long. The following morning, 2 of them closed. All the lava was now coming out of the last fissure. It grew into an elongated cone, the simplest shape of volcano we are all familiar with. The lava soon filled a large crater. It grew almost 100 feet tall during the first week, and it is still growing. On the night when the eruption started, lava spread out in all directions. Its cinders set ablaze the dry moss in the vicinity. Local authorities closed off the surrounding area. There were toxic gases from the volcanoes and smoke from the burning moss. Firefighters flocked to the area. After a week, they proclaimed the area safe. Visitors soon came to witness the birth of Europe's youngest volcano. This form of tourism is quite developed in Iceland. People come from all over the world to watch active volcanoes. The land of fire and ice is home to more than 130 volcanoes. Some 30 of them are active. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Is volcano tourism safe? In Iceland, it is. The country's authorities research and constantly monitor all of the hotspots. The island is dotted with several dozen seismic stations. These help researchers accurately predict future eruptions, and emergency services are accustomed to these sorts of events. They can quickly cordon off danger zones. This is what happened in 2010. A volcano in the south of the island, the name of which everyone struggled to pronounce, erupted. It spewed out a plume of steam and ash that was 7 miles high. This wasn't a fun time to be an air traveler. Winds carried the enormous plume southeast toward northern Europe. Many countries closed their airspace for several days for safety reasons. The volcano erupted in March, but the Earth was shaking from January the same year, so seismologists knew that an eruption was approaching. When it comes to the continent's youngest volcano, the tourist infrastructure is already there. Visitors can leave their cars at a designated parking lot. Then they go on a 5-hour-long trek. This leads to a viewing deck. Tourists are so close to the epicenter that they can feel the heat haze from the crater. The sight is the most impressive at nighttime. Safety is never a concern. Scientists regularly chart out hazard maps that outline the borders of lava fields. This way, visitors who stick by the rules are never in harm's way. More than a week after the eruption started, a section of the crater collapsed. Lava flowed downhill west of the volcano. This majestic smoldering hot river is slow-moving lava. Scientists categorize it as an AA type. The term is Hawaiian. It describes basaltic lava that has a rough and brittle surface. The flow is composed of broken lava blocks that are called clinkers. They fall off as the substance flows. This reveals red-hot areas. The cooler sections of lava are gray and black in color. When it moves forward, it produces a distinctive sound like shattering glass. Nearly a month after the eruption of the new volcano, we got aerial footage of an interesting phenomenon. A tornado formed directly over the lava flow. This occurs due to the high temperatures in the area. When the conditions are right, a column of heated air can easily turn into a mini tornado. Scientists observed a similar event happen during the 2018 eruption of Mount Kilauea in Hawaii. The lava fields of Europe's second-largest island tell the story of the creation of Iceland. It sits above the place where the North American and Eurasian plates meet each other. Tectonic plates are huge, rocky chunks of Earth's most outer layer. There are roughly 20 of them. They rest on a partially molten layer of rock. All the lava we see on the surface starts its journey here. You could say that these plates float on molten rock. Their boundaries are unstable, so when two plates grind past each other, they release tremendous amounts of energy. The formation of volcanoes is one result. These are places where the molten rock travels upward to the surface. Iceland began to form some 60 million years ago. The tectonic plates under the ocean drifted apart. Enough lava piled up on the surface to create solid ground. This ancient rock is under the waves today. As new lava reaches the surface and cools down, it pushes the old rock away from the center of the island. That's why the oldest parts of Iceland aren't 60, but only 16 million years old. The country's active lava fields are young in geological terms. Some of them are under 1,000 years old. Scientists consider the island a hot spot for volcanoes, pun intended. Nearly a third of the basaltic lava that reaches the Earth's surface in recorded history came from Icelandic eruptions. Fissure swarms, like the ones before the 2023 eruption, cover 30% of the Nordic country. For this reason, only a quarter of the island is inhabited. Norse Vikings were the first people to settle in Iceland at the beginning of the 10th century. Nature threw them a loud welcoming party. Just a few years after their arrival, they witnessed one of the greatest volcanic eruptions in history. Vikings came from a region without volcanoes, so they had no clue as to what was going on. Today, Icelanders are used to such events. This is good because their homeland is entering a new era of volcanic activity. Volcanologists suspect that recent events are an introduction to decades of more frequent eruptions. The peninsula that is home to Earth's youngest volcano is just 17 miles southwest of Iceland's capital city. It's been dormant for a long time. Present-day eruptions there are a reminder that the natural processes that created Iceland are still ongoing. Recently, scientists discovered that there's a historical link between volcanic eruptions in the north of Europe and glaciers. Our planet went through at least 5 major ice ages. These were exceptionally lengthy periods when the average temperature on Earth dropped. The result was the expansion of ice sheets across northern Europe and North America. The last ice age ended some 10,000 years ago. Researchers are still trying to fully understand how these glacial periods affected volcanic activity. They suspect that the sheer weight of all that ice disrupts the flow of magma underground. When glaciers retreat, the pressure is lifted. This makes it easier for lava to flow upward to the surface where it bursts. If all the volcanoes on Earth suddenly erupted together, it'd be loud. We'd also have around 1,500 of these formations bursting at once. Now normally it's just 10 to 20 volcanoes that are active each day. But what would the world look like if they all blew their tops simultaneously? Geologists think it wouldn't be pretty. Even if only the land volcanoes erupted together, it would set off a chain reaction way worse than anything we've ever seen before. The two big problems would be ash and volcanic gases. While the explosions in lava would be damaging for people nearby, the real danger lies in what happens next. A thick layer of ash would cover the planet, blocking out sunlight completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means crops would fade away and temperatures would drop considerably. And all this ash cloud could remain in our atmosphere for up to 10 years. Now, ash aside, there's also acid rain to worry about. Volcanic gases like hydrochloric acid and sulfur dioxide would mix with the atmosphere and fall back down as acid rain. This type of weather would harm the groundwater and ocean surfaces. Even if humans would find a way to survive up to this point, we'd have no corals and no other sea creatures around. Scientists have seen similar events in Earth's history at a smaller scale. Big volcanic eruptions have been linked to mass extinctions. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it cooled parts of the world for 2 years. But the extra carbon dioxide from these eruptions could also heat the planet, the same way we turn our stoves to broil for that extra crispy layer on our casserole. Geologists also mentioned that there's evidence in our atmosphere that stuff like this may have happened in the distant past. During the Cretaceous period, carbon dioxide levels were way higher than today, which made it difficult for marine life to thrive. Who would survive all this? Probably just some extremophiles, these organisms that survive in harsh conditions like hot springs or deep undersea vents. As for humans, we could all lay low in underground bunkers until things clear up, or build multiple space stations that could fit us all. Yeah, right. The chances of all volcanoes erupting at once, though, are very slim. Whew! That's because there isn't one giant source supplying all the volcanoes on Earth. Each one of these openings has its own deposit of magma, except for a few cases where they indeed share the supply. For example, in 1912, Nova Rupta in Alaska erupted alongside another volcano sharing magma. Scientists have also found evidence of magma hiding under volcanic areas, like under the Taupau volcanic zone in New Zealand. This magma can spread out horizontally for long distances, but is still just a local feature. Even if we consider all the magma under Taupau as one system, it's not connected to other volcanic areas like Indonesia or the Philippines. Because the great majority are isolated, volcanoes can't sync up to erupt at once. The magma comes from different processes like mantle decompression or adding water to the mantle through subduction. There's no way to make all these different volcanoes erupt together because of how tectonics work. Now, that doesn't mean we won't see interesting volcano activity in the future. Take an underwater area near British Columbia, where recently about 200 small earthquakes per hour have been noted. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, off the coast of Vancouver Island, magma is set to erupt, heating the water so much that it'll bubble like soda. However, this event will likely go unnoticed by anyone other than scientists. The anticipated eruption will most likely happen around 3 miles below the ocean surface. Scientists explain that the earthquakes range from negative to 4.1 magnitude, meaning only those nearby would feel any tremors. This unusual activity gives us a rare opportunity to study how the Earth's crust forms. The magma beneath the ocean floor is estimated to be almost 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but will cool rapidly upon eruption and contact with water. This runny rock will solidify upon contact with the seafloor, turning black quickly. This event will be useful for biologists too, who will have the opportunity to study the marine animal's response to any changes, like run! Antarctica, often seen as a vast icy continent, also holds a volcanic surprise beneath its frozen surface. Researchers have identified over 130 under the western ice sheet alone, making it the largest volcanic region on Earth. Most of these volcanoes, about 90, were only recently discovered in 2017. But could any of these Antarctic volcanoes actually erupt? Well, it depends on which volcano we're talking about. While these formations are relatively young in geologic terms, it's hard for scientists to tell if they're still active or not. There are only 2 confirmed active volcanoes in Antarctica, Deception Island and Mount Erebus. The latter, standing tall as the highest peak on the continent, has been continuously erupting since at least 1972. It's known for emitting gas and steam, and sometimes even throwing out rocks in what are called strombolian eruptions. One of its most notable features is a persistent lava lake in its crater, a rare phenomenon due to specific conditions needed to keep the surface molten. For instance, it's fueled by a steady supply of magma from deep within the Earth's mantle. This continuous inflow of molten rock provides the material for the lava lake to exist. It also features low ambient temperatures. Despite its location in Antarctica, Erebus has relatively mild temperatures in its summit region because of the heat generated by the volcanic activity. This allows the lava lake to remain liquid rather than freezing over. Deception Island, another active volcano, last erupted in the 70s. While it's currently not showing signs of imminent eruption, it's being monitored closely for any concerning activity. Apart from these 2 being confirmed to be active, Antarctica is dotted with fumaroles, openings in the Earth's crust that release gases and vapors. Sometimes these fumaroles can create icy towers reaching heights of 10 feet. What we should focus on is maybe supervolcanoes. They're this type that has the potential to produce the most massive and destructive eruptions. Unlike the typical one, which has a single vent, supervolcanoes have a vast magma chamber beneath the surface, spanning tens or even hundreds of miles in diameter. Their eruptions can have catastrophic effects on the surrounding area and even impact global climate patterns because of the amounts of ash and gases they spill out into the atmosphere. One famous supervolcano is the Yellowstone one, which some say is gearing up for another eruption. It has the capacity to unleash a colossal eruption, spewing over 240 cubic miles of material. As much as we'd like to predict its behavior, volcanoes don't stick to a calendar. On the contrary, eruptions simply happen when there's enough magma beneath the surface. There also needs to be enough pressure for the magma to travel upwards. As far as we can measure, these conditions are not currently met at Yellowstone. Sure, many volcanoes operate on a cyclical pattern, but that doesn't mean Yellowstone is overdue. In fact, Yellowstone has had just 3 major eruptions over the past 2.1 million years. Also, the term supervolcano refers to the formation's size, not necessarily how fussy it is. Yellowstone's monitoring is extensive, tracking seismicity, ground deformation, thermal emissions, gas, water chemistry, and surface changes. Signs of an eruption would include thousands of earthquakes over a short period. We'd also see deformation on the ground and weird gas emissions ahead of time. Stable, as it might look like for now, the consequences of it having a major eruption could look ugly. Ash dispersion could blanket a 500-mile radius, potentially disrupting Midwest agriculture and clogging waterways. Ash and gas emissions into the stratosphere could induce global climatic effects, making our planet colder for several years. And yes, we've seen some research that it shows there's more liquid molten rock under the Yellowstone volcano than scientists believe. But that doesn't translate to imminent danger. Whoa! Earth's surface is shaking. Long cracks split the ground open. Lava rivers are rapidly flowing down the slopes. Deafening noise is filling the air. Rocks and other debris are flying high up. Clouds of volcanic gas and ash cover the sky. Now, this is not a plot of a blockbuster disaster movie. It's what happens when supervolcanoes decide to erupt. But this is likely not the scenario that will take place when the world's largest volcano, Mauna Loa, decides to finish its long nap. In 2021, scientists were sure it would happen soon. But so far, nothing. The volcano's seismicity keeps increasing and then going back to normal. But you never know when this giant will finally come back to life. That's why experts have been monitoring geological activity on Hawaii's largest island for quite some time. The Big Island of Hawaii is made up of 5 volcanoes, including the most active on the planet, Kilauea, and the largest, Mauna Loa. This gigantic thing makes up almost half the landmass of the island. And what lava Kilauea emits in one day, Mauna Loa could spew out within 20 minutes. That's what it did in 1984. While Mauna Loa's smaller sibling has been throwing tantrums for a while, the giant has been slumbering ever since its last eruption. But very recently, the Hawaii Volcano Observatory has recorded more than 200 mini-earthquakes below Mauna Loa. It likely means an increased flow of magma down there. Good morning! The volcano might be waking up. Or not. If Mauna Loa did suddenly erupt, lava flows could reach the ocean and the most populated and touristy places, like Captain Cook, very quickly, in a matter of hours. In 1984, the last time the volcano erupted, lava got as far as the outskirts of Hilo on the other side of the island. That's where a campus of the University of Hawaii is found. Luckily, people had a few weeks' warning to get ready for the disaster. These days, locals have special go bags ready with the most important stuff, including documents and money. Such precautions can come in handy in case of an emergency evacuation. Even though most Mauna Loa eruptions have so far only affected the summit area, several of them sent lava all the way down to the ocean, and you never know how powerful the next eruption will be. Now, what is the highest mountain on Earth? Mount Everest, you say? Well, it depends. From seafloor to the summit, Mauna Loa is 1,000 feet taller than the famous Himalayan peak. The volcano is so big, it makes the Pacific plate it's sitting on literally slump under its weight. Scientists say that when this monster of a volcano erupts, the volume of lava coming out per unit will be life-threatening. Over its recorded history, Mauna Loa has been erupting regularly, almost every 6 years. And even though the last eruption of the volcano occurred about 40 years ago, scientists are certain it'll happen again. Now, remember the scene I showed you at the beginning? Well, you can relax. It's not likely to happen with Mauna Loa. The thing is, big island volcanoes, including Mauna Loa, aren't very volatile. That's because they're shield volcanoes. These volcanoes got such a name because they aren't really very high and resemble a warrior's shield placed flat on the ground. Shield volcanoes get formed by very fluid lava. It travels farther and forms much thinner flows than lava erupted from a stratovolcano, which is conically shaped and tall, like the infamous Krakatoa in Indonesia. So if, or should I say when, Mauna Loa erupts, there probably won't be ash clouds and tons of debris. The most dangerous thing will be lava. Since Mauna Loa is a shield volcano, its lava is extremely fluid and voluminous, which allows it to flow far and fast. Using theoretical vent maps, experts from the Hawaii Volcano Observatory have made charts of possible lava flows. They're kind of worried about earthquakes clustering at high rates. It likely means that lava is on the move under the surface. 500 to 600 earthquakes per day are a serious reason to be on high alert. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily mean a disaster or inevitable eruption. Around a decade ago, several earthquakes that happened at the same time signaled that something was happening under Mauna Loa. But an eruption didn't occur. Instead, half the volcano shifted a bit to the south. This way, it probably gave more room to magma so that it had enough space to stay beneath the surface. Now, let's get back to the catastrophic eruption we saw at the beginning of the video. That's what often happens when a supervolcano erupts. Those are volcanoes that have at least once had an eruption with a volcanic explosivity index of 8, which is the largest recorded number on the index. Supervolcanoes are often extremely large, with no cone at all. That's because they're typically the remains of gigantic magma chambers that once flared up, leaving behind a caldera. They're usually found over hot spots. Supervolcanoes can produce super eruptions, and when they do, they blow more than 240 cubic miles of ash, molten rock, and hot gases up into the air. In other words, 4 super eruptions could fill the Grand Canyon to the brim. Supervolcanoes get formed when gigantic volumes of scorching hot magma are trying to escape from deep underground. This magma rises close to the surface but can't break through Earth's crust. That's why a huge pressurized pool of bubbling magma gathers at a depth of only several miles. The pressure keeps growing because more magma is trying to get to the surface until, bam, a super eruption occurs. The most recent super eruption happened in New Zealand. Well, when I say recent, I mean around 26,500 years ago. Nah, I wasn't around then. That's when a supervolcano beneath the surface of Lake Tahoe spewed into the air more than 300 cubic miles of ash and pumice. Imagine 500,000 Great Pyramids of Giza flying up at the same time. That's how incredibly powerful that eruption was. But the most exciting and confusing thing about the eruption was that the Tahoe volcano simply didn't go off like many others. At first, everything was going as usual. More than 200 square miles of magma had built up under the surface, and the pressure was getting higher and higher. But after the rock cracked and the first part of lava rushed out of the crater, something went wrong, and the supervolcano took a break. Only several months later, the disastrous eruption shook the ground, and thousands of tons of lava, rocks, and ash flew high into the atmosphere. But the age of supervolcanoes isn't over. The most infamous of them all is probably the one in Yellowstone National Park. This giant handles at least 3 mega-powerful eruptions, and who knows how many smaller ones. If this monster erupted anywhere as strongly as it did 2.1 million years ago, it would spit out more than 588 cubic miles of red-hot material. You can probably picture it more vividly if I tell you that this volume is comparable to 65 million Capitol rotundas in Washington, D.C. piled together. Wow. Anyway, scientists are sure that Yellowstone doesn't present any danger these days. For an eruption to happen, magma inside must be at least 50% molten. With the Yellowstone caldera, this number is just 5 to 15%. But of course, Yellowstone isn't the only supervolcano on our planet. There's also New Zealand's Tahoe you already know about, Japan's Airi Caldera, California's Long Valley, Indonesia's Toba. Any of them can one day produce a super eruption. There are also several so-called supervolcanoes that haven't lived up to this name yet because they've never produced anything like a super eruption. For example, in 1883, Indonesian volcano Krakatoa went off. The power of the eruption tore the volcano's walls open, and cold seawater rushed into its molten insides. The difference in temperature made the volcano blow up with a deafening boom. It was clearly heard 2,000 miles away in Australia. It earned the blast the title of the loudest sound in history. But even though the consequences of this event were truly catastrophic, it still turned out not powerful enough to be called a super eruption. So, you might have heard that Yellowstone National Park is sitting on top of a giant supervolcano. That's a reason why the area can boast powerful geysers and hot springs. But it also means that underneath Yellowstone, there is an enormous magma chamber. In 2015, researchers from the University of Utah found out that this chamber was much bigger than everyone had previously thought. They even found one more reservoir with magma under the top one. Apparently, the more spacious the chambers are, the more magma they contain. Together, the two reservoirs store a glob of magma that could easily fill the Grand Canyon not once, but 11 times. But you know the most worrying thing about the magma chambers? They tend to push against the ground above them. As a result, the land in Yellowstone rises about 1 to 2 inches a year. On top of that, Yellowstone has the status of an active volcano, and its volcanic explosivity index, yes, there is one, is 8 out of 8. Such a high number means that if this volcano erupted, it would be an apocalyptic event. To put it into perspective, the eruption of Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991, which is considered the most powerful in living memory, was given a mere 6 on the volcanic explosivity index. Ha! Loser. Now, let's figure out if there's anything to worry about. In March 2023, the University of Utah seismograph stations recorded 354 earthquakes in the entire region of Yellowstone National Park. Sounds like a lot. But keep in mind that the most impressive event of the month was a mini earthquake of magnitude 3.7. It was part of a swarm of 106 earthquakes that began on March 29th and continued until the end of the month. Yep, earthquakes apparently also come in swarms, so be aware. Experts say that Yellowstone's seismic activity is, well, kind of more active than usual, but it's really nothing serious. A geophysicist working at Yellowstone Volcano Observatory called Michael Pollan claims that the volcano won't erupt anytime soon. For this to happen, there must be enough magma ready to erupt beneath the surface. Whew. There should also be enough pressure to cause this magma to rise. But neither of these conditions exist today. According to the expert, Yellowstone is stable now. At the same time, Pollan and his team are keeping track of all kinds of underground activity, looking for warning signs of possible eruptions. Some of them can be the frequency of earthquakes and ground deformation. Thousands of mini earthquakes, coupled with extreme changes in the surface of the ground in that area, can be alarming. The team also monitors the temperature of the park's thermal features. That's another noteworthy sign of a potential disaster: park-wide changes in geyser activity, as well as gas and thermal emissions. So, despite the media claims that Yellowstone is due to erupt soon because the last eruption happened 70,000 years ago, that's not how volcanoes work. Experts say that it's one of the most popular misconceptions about volcanoes. They don't follow timelines. If a supereruption did happen, though, the most worrying thing for us would not be the lava flows, and not an earthquake that would most likely accompany the natural disaster. No, the worst consequence of such a supereruption would be ash and ashfall. Let's have a look at what it was like when the Yellowstone volcano erupted many years ago. There have been at least 3 supereruptions in the history of the volcano. The most powerful of them was 2,500 times more devastating than the terrifying eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state in 1980. As for the most recent supereruption, it was dubbed the Lava Creek eruption. It formed the Yellowstone caldera after spewing out an insane amount of dust, volcanic ash, and rock into the air. Recently, scientists have also learned about 2 other previously unknown supereruptions that happened around 9 and 8.7 million years ago. The younger of the 2 is now considered to be the largest recorded event of the whole Snake River Yellowstone volcanic province. Anyway, let's have a look at what was going on all those millions of years ago. Because I wasn't around then, so we're all assuming this stuff based on evidence. The first signs of the disaster appeared long before the catastrophe broke out. For thousands of years, the heat had been welling up from within the planet's insides. It had been melting rock beneath the planet's crust and leaving behind huge chambers. They were filled with a pressurized mixture of semi-solid rock, magma, water vapor, and different gases, including carbon dioxide. All this scorching underground soup was expanding since more and more magma arrived with time. The land over the volcanic system was rising upward almost unnoticeably. A year before the supereruption, Yellowstone gave a warning, a burp maybe, but that long ago there was no one who could interpret these signals. Plus, those alarming processes were mostly going on underground. For example, decompression releases gas bubbles. While bursting, such bubbles can often power particular kinds of eruptions. Months before the eruption, small-scale earthquakes became more frequent and more intense. The ground in many spots all over the supervolcano got hotter than it used to be. Surface lakes and groundwater also became warmer. If people had been around at that time, they would have noticed unusual steam fogging in that area. Not long before the eruption started, the growing pressure pushed the ground over the magma chamber up. This created a dome-shaped uplift. Narrow cracks started to open along the edges of this dome. Imagine opening a bottle of soda after you've shaken it. Something like that was happening near the volcano. Think Mentos and Diet Coke. The pressure was released through the fractures when gases were bursting out from under the surface. So right before the disaster, the ground around the Yellowstone volcano lifted. Geothermal pools and geysers heated up to boiling temperatures and got more acidic than usual. The magma started to rise toward the surface. At one point, the rock roof of the magma chamber couldn't resist anymore and the eruption kicked off. Small but constant tremors began to move the ground days before the catastrophe. But the real shaking didn't start until several minutes before the eruption. With a deafening roar, a massive column of lava and ash hurled up into the air. Within several minutes, a pyroclastic flow rushed across the area at a hurricane-force speed. Such a flow is a liquid mixture of half-solid lava pieces, volcanic ash, and hot expanding gases. It looked like an extremely hot toxic snow avalanche. With a temperature of about 1300 degrees, it was burning everything in its path. The volcano kept pumping ash for days on end. For all living creatures, ash fallout was one of the most dangerous consequences of the eruption. Volcanic ash turns into glassy cement within seconds of being inhaled. Most animals didn't have a chance to survive. Even thick trees started to collapse under the weight of this dense substance. It only took a couple of days until a thick layer of ash covered huge territories. After the ash got into the stratosphere, the temperatures all over the world started to drop. The eruption was rich in sulfur, which is an effective sunblocker. That's why it soon got so cold that there was no summer in the whole world for the next several years. Animals couldn't find food and clean water. This natural disaster, called the Gray's Landing supereruption, was colossal. That's how researchers described it in their recent studies. It affected a huge territory. The streams of lava enameled an area as large as New Jersey in scorching hot volcanic glass. It instantly sterilized the land surface, wiping out all the plant life that had been thriving there before. Now, if such an eruption were to happen these days, it would cover Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming with almost 3 feet of toxic volcanic ash. Many regions would be plunged into darkness. Even the coast, where most Americans live, would experience problems with the spread of the ash cloud. It would destroy crops and contaminate pastures, ruin power lines and electrical transformers. Well, so I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's a good thing that such a disaster isn't expected to occur anytime soon. Hey, we got enough other stuff on our plate.
The latest supereruption of Yellowstone occurred 640,000 years ago, and it was long before Homo sapiens saw the light of day. But we were around during another, no less devastating natural disaster. This supereruption took place on the island of Sumatra around 74,000 years ago. That's when an erupting supervolcano wreaked havoc on huge territories, sending up plumes of debris and ash that spread for thousands of miles and caused temperatures on the planet to plummet. The effects of this supereruption were visible as far away as southern Africa. Experts believe they could have impacted early humans there. By the time the volcano erupted, our ancestors had already been using stone tools and had likely known how to produce yarn. And some specialists even think that the Toba supereruption was so powerful it could push our ancestors to the brink of extinction. They claim that Toba might be the largest volcanic eruption to occur on Earth within the last 2 million years. The eruption disgorged so much pyroclastic rock, it would be enough to cover the entire United States to the depth of a one-story house. About a third of that deposit piled up on northern Sumatra, while a lot more ended up beneath the floor of the Indian Ocean. The supereruption left an elliptical crater lake around 60 miles long. The caldera is so large it's hard to feel that you're indeed in a volcano. Pumice deposits from the eruption remain in the canyon walls and go deep below the ground. There aren't many arguments about the amount of pumice and ash involved in this disaster. At the same time, experts aren't sure how much sulfur ended up in the atmosphere. Even some sulfur layers in the polar ice could be potential candidates, but so far, scientists haven't found any connection between them and Toba. But let's get back to the dramatic impact the supereruption had on early humans. It turns out some not only survived, but even thrived after this natural catastrophe, at least judging by the artifacts they made during and after the eruption. The disaster might not have posed a serious threat to those of our ancestors who took refuge along the coast. Genetic evidence hints that modern humans descend from a few thousand people that ventured out of Africa around 60,000 years ago. Why just a few thousand? According to some experts, the rest of our ancestors could have been devastated by the Toba eruption. After all, the supervolcano spewed out 1,000 cubic miles of dust and rock in a flash, leaving a scar in the ground that was dozens of miles wide. All that dust and sulfur Toba sent into the atmosphere potentially cooled the surface of our planet, which led to the appearance of glaciers and the lowering of Earth's sea levels. And since Toba might have had an important role in shaping humankind, scientists have been working hard trying to understand precisely how early humans reacted to this disaster. In 2011, several researchers found an enigmatic soil sample in South Africa's Pinnacle Point, an archaeological site overlooking the Indian Ocean. This sample contained some volcanic ash. After examining the layer, they found more than 400,000 artifacts left by early humans. Those ranged from heat-treated stone tools to signs of fire and animal bones. Based on this finding, the team suggested that early humans on the South African coast thrived after the eruption, living in that area for thousands of years and improving their tools. The region might have served as a refuge during and after the Toba eruption. A 2009 study suggested that the eruption could have lowered global temperatures by 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It would have made survival tough elsewhere in Africa. If there had been a volcanic winter, it wouldn't have been as cold along the coastline. On the other hand, newer studies claim that Toba spewed out so much sulfur into the atmosphere that the resulting aerosols could have stuck together, which would have limited their cooling effect in the long term. In other words, right after the eruption, temperatures would have plummeted, but only in some regions. And after 3 years or so, the effects of the eruptions would have calmed down altogether, becoming not dangerous to humans. Well, apparently, more research is needed. Meanwhile, let's figure out if we should watch out for any volcanoes these days. Last year, thousands of small earthquakes shook the ground near Iceland's Svartsengi geothermal power plant. Magma rose to the surface there, and now it has opened wide fractures slicing through the small town of Grindavik. The ground there is still swelling, and an eruption might happen with little notice. But of course, that's not all. Over the planet, 45 other volcanoes keep rumbling. For example, Italy's Vesuvius, that infamous thing that finished the city of Pompeii in 79 CE. Over the last 17,000 years, the volcano has experienced 8 explosive eruptions, followed by powerful pyroclastic flows, dense masses of super hot ash, lava fragments, and gases flowing at high speeds. The volcano's last eruption happened in 1944. Mount Rainier is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the USA. Its high elevation, chemical composition, and proximity to Washington's Seattle and Tacoma suburbs, and the volcano's ability to produce massive pyroclastic flows make Mount Rainier a threat to consider. The heat from this volcano could potentially melt the ice and snow covering it, leading to rapid downstream flows of debris, mud, and rocks. The Novarupta volcano in Alaska's Katmai National Park and Reserve formed in a 1912 eruption, which was the world's largest in the 20th century. The volcano sent almost 7 cubic miles of ash and debris into the air. It also produced such a powerful ash flow that it created the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. Mount Pinatubo is located in a populated region in the Philippines. It became notorious after a 1991 massive eruption, which was the second largest eruption of the 20th century. More than 700 people lost their lives during that natural disaster. Today, more than 21 million people live within 62 miles of Pinatubo. Mount Agun, a continuously erupting volcano in Indonesia, had its last major eruption in 1963. It was one of the most tragic eruptions in the country's history. It lasted for 11 months, producing ashfall and pyroclastic flows that led to the loss of more than 1,000 lives and serious property damage. People saw ash plumes above the volcano throughout 2018, following the eruption in November 2017. Japan's Mount Fuji hasn't erupted since 1707. That year, a massive earthquake likely set it off. In 2014, experts warned that Fuji could be at risk of another eruption following the 9-magnitude earthquake that shook Japan in 2011. Experts believed the earthquake had raised pressure below Fuji. The eruption in 1707 sent so much ash and debris into the air that all this mass even reached Tokyo. Should Fuji erupt again, it would affect more than 25 million people in the surrounding areas. The eruption of Washington's Mount St. Helens in 1980 was one of the most destructive volcanic events in U.S. history. 57 people, as well as thousands of animals, lost their lives during that natural disaster. The eruption also destroyed around 200 square miles of forest. Experts think that Mount St. Helens' history of massive eruptions means that future catastrophes are bound to happen. The next explosive eruption might send large amounts of ash all over the Pacific Northwest. No wonder the volcano is under close monitoring. One of Indonesia's most active volcanoes, Mount Merapi, has been erupting for centuries. NASA claims that the biggest risk of this volcano is pyroclastic flows, which can spread over vast areas and harm loads of people. For the last time, Merapi erupted in January 2024, sending plumes of smoke into the air. These days, more than 24 million people live in the area surrounding this volcano.